Hey there, welcome to episode number 49 of Killer POV. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob G from FEARNET and Icons of Fright. Joining me as always, Elric Kane, who can't even stay in his seat.
What is he doing?
Ants in my
doing?
pants.
What's it?
It's my new horror film. It's body horror.
Are you
Ants
getting
in
comfortable?
his pants. Yeah, I'm comfortable.
Okay, good. And
My
from
seat.
Fangoria, Rebekah McKendry.
Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Good. I missed you guys.
I missed you
out
guys.
last
Like 6
Guys.
weeks.
6 weeks.
I think it
2
was
weeks.
like
Oh,
2.
I thought we had 8 banked episodes that played.
No.
Oh, I wasn't meant to let people.
Don't give away the
Oh,
illusion.
no, I'm just kidding.
No. Yeah, I was in New York last week, which somewhat inspired one of our topics. We're going to be doing childhood obsessions, horror-related
Yes.
ones, and then horror documentaries as well
Yeah.
to fit in with our guest. But yeah, just going through all my old stuff kind of is what brought up the idea of childhood obsessions. And I think Elric actually pitched it too. So
I pitched and then had the least ideas. I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, Elric walked in tonight.
I was
He
like, what are we
I
talking
don't
about?
know what we're doing. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Unbelievable.
childhood obsessions, man. I got a list.
I went deep on
always-
horror documentary.
did you really? So yeah.
The thing I
episode-
wasn't wanting to do at the start. When you pitched that to me, I was like, hard. And then I started going, oh, yeah, all those films that made me fall in love with this.
I was like, we will have. Elric always worries that we're not going to have enough to talk about. We talk too much sometimes.
I know.
We've never talked too much. It could never happen.
There's going to be plenty to talk about when it comes to horror docs, so don't you worry about that. So 49. We're almost up to our 50th episode,
is
and I
insane.
didn't mention it last time, but this is like our year plus anniversary.
Yeah.
We've done a
Yeah.
year of these shows, so
And to celebrate our 50th, we are reanimating both H.P. Lovecraft and Edgar Allan Poe to
my
be on our
god,
show.
what guest?
We are going to, a seance
That
show.
is going to be
A
A
amazing.
seance show would be
Are we
kind
going
of
to get them
badass.
drunk and argue about what we like?
That would be
Yes.
interesting. No, a real seance. Wouldn't that be cool? Like a real
Yes.
seance show where we try to communicate with.
Who out there is what is it called? A
psychic?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
need a psychic on
If
the
we
show.
have a psychic
Hire
fan.
a real psychic to come and do a seance here.
Here's the question then to lead off the day. Then
I'm
who would
scared.
you most want to contact in the horror world? If we're doing a horror podcast with someone deceased,
Yes.
who would you want to interview from beyond the
Anthony
grave?
Perkins.
Of course.
Vincent
Of course.
Price.
Vincent Price.
Vincent, that's a very, very good one.
So listen, for our 50th...
Oh, I know. I would want
Who would
Peter
you want?
Lorre just because of his voice. On the radio, it would be the best interview ever.
Oh, wow.
That'd be so good.
Maybe
Wow.
Roddy McDowell as well would be
Oh, Roddy
amazing.
would be-
Yeah, he would be
All right,
cool.
so on our 50th episode, our guest will be Vincent Price.
Right.
Roddy
Peter Lorre.
McDowell, Peter Lorre, Anthony Perkins.
The
These are
entire
all
cast of
people.
The Raven and Anthony Perkins.
Yes. I will tell you who will not be our guests on
Oh.
the show, and I have no problem calling these people out. I'll be the bad guy. I don't mind. So just so you guys out there listening don't ever ask us, John Landis will never be on the show, apparently, because we requested him to come on, and he replied to saying, I'm unavailable. The funny thing is, we didn't give him a date.
Yeah.
So apparently he's never available. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Ever.
And you know what? I don't mind saying that because A, he gave me so much shit not participating in the Psycho Legacy. Yet our future guest is in
Got
tight
us
with him,
full.
so we'll have to find out what he did. to
He
get
is
his
one. There's so
attention.
many different guys. I'm a huge Landis fan in terms of the way he talks about movies and stuff.
Yeah.
and
Me too.
we had a great show with him on Inside Horror. The first episode, it was really fun. But he is funny because he's the kind of guy if you met him 4 or 5 times and then ran into him on the street, he would never remember.
I've
Unlike a lot of
definitely
other
met
people
him
who are
multiple
different.
times, and he's still like, "Hi, I'm Rebecca," and then he'll be like, "Oh, yeah."
He's just so freaking entertaining, though. So I
He's
give him a
entertaining.
pass.
I love
I give him a
talking to
pass
him
for
every time.
dissing
not.
us. All right.
I do not because he's dissed me several times.
Okay.
So
All right.
Oh,
I like his movies, but
I didn't want to tell Rob, but he actually did respond to the email saying, I'm totally interested in the show. And then
Except
he
that
read
guy.
Rob G's on there. He's like,
Oh,
that
really?
kid's going to fucking harass me
That
again.
oh
kid.
yeah, and who is he? Yeah,
Unbelievable. Number 2, John Carpenter apparently does not do podcasts.
yep.
That was the
We should
reply
research that
got.
to see if that's true.
He'll do live shows
Yeah.
like Dread Central Live
Yeah,
last
yeah,
week.
he did,
But
yeah.
that's not a podcast, so he won't do a podcast.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Depends what your definition. I think if we...
Quite frankly, do you guys want to hear John Carpenter on the show? Because I said that I don't think he would be a fascinating interview. I mean, I love him. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. But he always seems like he's annoyed.
He's pretty curt. He's like, but you know what? His heroes were like that too.
Yeah.
John Ford and people like that. Howard Hawks, John Ford. They're like one-word response interview
Yeah.
types.
Right.
I remember Peter Bogdanovich interviewing Ford. How'd you shoot this? And Ford just leans in and goes, with a camera. And that was like the interview. And you're just like, oh, I guess that's that.
That's
You know?
it.
Apparently, if we could get him going on basketball, he would go on
Well,
for
I can do
hours.
that.
But
Yeah, basketball and video games, and I'm
We
not
could talk
good
about
on either.
Kazam and Shaq, other movies. Boom.
So sorry, guys. Those two will not be coming on the show anytime soon, at least as far as we know.
We're going to try to get something
all right.
fun for the big 50. And the cool thing about number 50, we'll have some cool guest. We don't know who that is. It's going to be in 2 weeks' time.
We'll
we
make
will
sure
have
it's good.
champagne and I will be returning with new life under my wing. So that's why we're breaking next week.
Yes, we're taking a break next week so that Elric can usher his second child into this world.
Bring more men into the world.
We thought about doing a live show from the delivery room.
Which I think we should. I mean, Selena won't mind, will she?
Follow me on Instagram, and you'll probably find some great videos in there.
So you just scream out what movies you're reminded of during the whole process.
Yeah. Well, I think I should watch It's Alive 2, because I remember watching It's Alive 1 for the first. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's going to be C-section, so I'm not going to watch, because I've been told you don't want to watch.
They won't let you. They'll put like a sheet up. And,
they don't want you to see those.
Dave kind of peeked around the side of the sheet, and then he got kind of, weak in the knees and stopped.
There's some stuff humans are not for our eyes.
Yes, never for me.
And you know what's cool about the horror crowd? I find that they tend to be the biggest pussies when it comes to natural bodily fluids and stuff, including myself. When it comes to blood and gore, in real life, they tend to be the ones who are the most squeamish.
Oh, I'm guilty of that myself. I can't see it in real life.
No, Dave had surgery over the week that we were off. My husband had spinal surgery, and I was in the room while they were like putting in his IVs and while they started like administering the aesthetics and everything, and they did it through a needle in his hand.
Oh God.
And so I'm watching them put this needle into his hand, and he had one in both hands. And I was like getting white, and the doctor looks at me and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm fine." And Dave was like, "Yeah, she works in horror films." But it was like he was bleeding a little, and I was freaking out. I don't handle.
See, but I hate that response. I'll be like in the break room at work, and somebody will cut their finger, like, "Oh my God," and they'll be like, "But don't you like horror movies?" And it's like, "Yeah, but I don't want to watch you bleed."
I do feel like it's a direct relation. I think like young kids probably were drawn to horror because it's so fucking safe.
Yeah.
Like it's so safe. You can experience anything you want and the movie ends and you're safe.
Yeah, exactly.
But oh my, if I get a splinter and I have to gouge that splinter out of my own hand, I'm like white and sweating and about to pass out at any minute. I'm like going into shock because I have to remove something from my finger. It's terrible.
Yeah, no, hospitals, are weird places. So, but no, it'll be exciting. And so we'll come back. Hopefully I'll have had a night of sleep by the time I return.
Good luck with that.
And we'll rock and roll. But for 50, I'll bring some champagne.
Nice.
For 50.
Champagne and a seance.
I think we need cupcakes or
champagne
cake.
And cupcakes.
Sure.
Cupcakes and champagne.
We'll see if Carpenter and Landis can bring them.
Okay.
Or sorry, Peter Lorre.
I'll have Mom make something tasty because I have like my mom's visiting right now.
Yes. Let's put her to work.
Yes.
Make us cupcakes
tasty
or something.
Tasty treats.
So for $2.49, we haven't seen each other in a week. I bet there's a lot of movies to talk about.
I have a ton.
I've got about 6 or 7.
I got a list.
Some I'll go in light. Going light on ones that aren't important and going deep on the ones that are.
Good.
Okay.
So who wants to kick off?
I'll kick off just because mine are already not timely anymore.
Okay.
But based on our last episode, I revisited My Bloody Valentine, the original 1981 version, as well as the remake on Blu-ray in 3D, which was awesome. I don't know, just because it was Valentine's Day and I wanted to see those movies. The original movie, as I remember, there's just something about it. It's definitely one of those. Well, it was shot in Canada. It's got that. There's a whole bunch of early 80s slasher movies that have a very specific look.
I think somebody's working on a Canadian, as we're going to talk about horror documentaries later, I think somebody's working on a Canadian horror film documentary.
I feel like I got a press release
a while ago,
and that'd be amazing.
I would love to see that because they were working differently. Yeah,
stuff.
Exactly.
But yeah, the original still works. I was able to get a Blu-ray, which I think is now at a print of the uncut version that Lionsgate put out several years back. And the thing is, I always thought the movie was one step shy of being as great as a Friday sequel. You know, the uncut version I think is just as good as any of the Friday 13th movies because there's at least 2 or 3 minutes worth of gore footage. You could tell when it's inserted because that footage was found separately, so the quality diminishes a little bit for those few sequences. But it adds that extra little punch. Like that's what always worked about the Friday 13th films is you'd get a kill and then all of a sudden it was like, ooh, like this little gory bit. Whereas like the original My Bloody Valentine just cut before you saw anything. So the uncut version of the 1981 original. Yes, I do. I got to show it to you.
I would like to see that.
It's great. It's like a whole different movie.
I've only seen it on VHS, and I liked it a lot.
Oh yeah, it'll feel like a new movie to you. And then I went on to the remake because we talked about it with Todd, and you know what? It's a pretty solid. It's a solid remake. I really like it. I love the depth in terms of the 3D, the story. Every time I watch it, I almost always forget who the killer is. Because they use some of the names and characters from the original, but not really.
And it's a different character than the original who turns out to be the killer, right?
Well, that's a spoiler, so I'm not going to say.
Oh, sorry about that.
Felt like a really different movie to me.
It did.
It
memory,
felt very different, but
I can't remember.
I enjoyed it more now in retrospect than when it initially came out. And then I immediately followed it up. I don't know why. I had an extra. I was not tired, and I decided I wanted to do a double feature. Film from the same time, I watched Friday the 13th, the 2009 remake, as a double bill with My Bloody Valentine. The fun thing being they both came out a month apart. One has Jensen, one has
that's right, yeah.
Jared, and it was kind of
weirdly enough, I'd rather watch Jared.
Supernatural.
Wait, no, Jensen. I'd rather watch Jensen in a Friday the 13th film.
Why is that?
Yeah,
because I think he's cooler.
You think he's cooler, but you didn't think he was that good in My Bloody Valentine.
I didn't like him at all, but I didn't know who he was.
Which one is the one that plays Sam on the show?
Sam is Jared.
Okay.
I like Dean.
Jared.
And Dean
I'm a Dean guy, not a
from Bloody Valentine. Okay.
Dean's Han Solo to the other guy's Luke Skywalker. I mean,
they're both great, and
completely.
I love Supernatural.
That's what
but
they're
the guy who plays Sam is much better looking because he is.
He's better in Friday the 13th. Watching them back to back, you're like
chiseled.
Yeah, you could tell Jensen's like, hey, he's all right in this movie, but then like Jared's like, he's the star of Friday the 13th. Yeah. He's great. I actually rather
Can
a lot of people.
Those guys on the show for our 50th.
Hey. Might be able to. Who knows?
We're at a place called Geek Nation. Yeah, and anything can happen.
See, we'll make some.
They're often probably shooting in Canada, but one of us did just help produce a movie with the other star of Supernatural, so there's that. Jim Beaver.
Oh yeah, you got the itch on.
He got killed.
He got it.
Yeah.
Oh
Spoiler.
wow.
Season
Hopefully
something.
Rebekah got that far.
Yeah, did you get that far?
I have not yet, but it's cool.
There
it's
you
cool.
go.
Everyone dies
He's
eventually.
been crippled and he's
back.
walking again. Yeah, everybody dies
We
and
all
comes
die
back
eventually.
at least twice so far.
So those are a good double bill, and I like Friday the 13th, even though I know it's gotten a lot of weird flack over the years. But in retrospect, it's actually a pretty all right Friday movie.
You missed a hell of a trivia night though, which I was reminded of because you talked about My Bloody Valentine, the new one. I did a name that nudity round where I actually put pictures in of people's breasts, and you had to guess the film that it came from.
Interestingly enough, the team I joined, which was to replace you,
took my place.
got every single one of those nudity ones correct.
Yes.
And Ryan, who runs, from the Bloodcast, walked in with the prizes, and he had one vinyl of Rosemary's Baby. And I looked up to him and I said, hey, just so you know, I'm going home with that. I went home with that.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. I got that and my other favorite movie, Slumber Party Massacre, on Blu-ray. I mean, what was the chance that I'd get the two things I wanted? So thank you, Rob, for allowing me to be on a team that never had a chance of losing.
Yes. Well, I'm glad
it was fun. We had fun. It was fun playing with them. They're good dudes.
Yeah. See, now you get to see it from the inside perspective.
Yeah, but I know one of them's better than some of the others now after being inside.
Who is it?
I don't know if I should reveal the secrets of the two.
I'm thinking Gero.
Gary's really good.
There's one person who in that team who is superhuman.
He's a secret,
and I thought it would be Brian. I must admit, when I went into it, I just assumed it was Brian, but it's
Mike
not
Williamson?
Brian. No. Mike would be on the other side.
Okay, now we're running out of people. Sean Keller?
Admit, no.
He's been on the show. I wasn't here when he was on the show.
We could say Jared's our secret weapon.
Jared
he's
amazing.
He's really amazing.
Is pretty incredible, I've got to say.
But we all have our strengths. That's the thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, trivia is too random to ever be perfect because it really relies on, like, I'll know something just random and you get one right, and that makes the difference in the whole round. But in terms of just consistently, like, really knowing his stuff, he's pretty impressive.
It's impressive.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about trivia that I've noticed is everybody kind of has their skill set. And, like, even Ryan and I as hosts have to admit, like, there are times, I know nothing about Hammer. I can never write a Hammer round.
Yeah.
And so, it's
and then you'll learn by writing questions and learn new things.
Exactly.
But anyway, it was a lot of fun.
My Bloody Valentine. Elric and I'll lead in since this is my last one, but both Elric and I got to see the Babadook. You had to say it like that. Which is in is it Australian?
It's Aussie.
It's Aussie. Okay. So it's a movie that just premiered at Sundance earlier this year. And it got a tremendous amount of buzz. It just came out of nowhere. Turns out it was a Kickstarter produced film, believe it or not. First time female writer-director who I think made a short film version of it.
She did, and it's on Vimeo. I haven't watched it yet, but it looked really good. And it was obviously what got her this gig because I think it was her and the other critter. Her name's Jennifer Kent.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
So we heard a lot of buzz coming out of Sundance about this movie, and it immediately went on and I heard nothing about it. I don't think any of us did.
I just heard when I was reading people's tweets from Sundance.
Sundance.
I was just like, everyone said it's super creepy.
Before that wasn't one of our like, hey, here's one of our most anticipated. This
Probably
year.
because it's Australian. I mean, often it's off the radar that way.
So it came out of nowhere, and we both got to see it. I enjoyed it. I think Elric liked it a little better than me.
Yeah, I mean, I
really liked it.
I think I really liked it because it feels like a throwback, not throwback, and it's like the 80s, but just in a simple, refined, scary movie with a
it's a ghost story essentially,
or a gothic in terms of the thing that's kind of the scary elements of it. But it's also just a mother and a kid, and it's a very simple setup. But the actual character is really creepy. The only thing I will say about it, we'll keep it simple, is that this creepy ass children. Maybe I like it also because having read a lot of children's books in the last like 2 years. This book's really fucking creepy, and she tears up all in the first act. We won't go into any more story than this, but she tears up some of the pages and then throws away the book, and then the books.
She reads this book, this children's book, and the legend in the children's book of the Babadook sort of comes to life.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, that's essentially.
But she doesn't know where the book got in her house, but she tears it up and throws it away, and then the book comes back to the doorstep, taped back together and with extra new pages, and that's like the first act turning point, and you're like, oh, this is creepy, and for me it really got me. There's a couple inconsistencies towards the end, but first time feature filmmaker, it's like, to me it's a great signal.
Wow. It's an impressive debut. I will give you a theory about the book after, because it's full of spoilers, so I'd rather not spoil anything for people. The less you know, the better.
Just put it on your radar as something you're going to want to see this year.
Later this year at some point, I'm sure it's going to get picked up and put out, and it's cool. It's creepy. It's got the potential. I think my problem with it is it had a lot of potential and it didn't take it fully where I would have liked it to see. But if it's successful, I would love to see what they do.
It would be a phenomenal sequel type movie.
Yeah, it'd be a great franchise.
Or a remakey American, hey, we saw this little Aussie film, we bought it and redid it.
That's kind of what will happen.
That's what they all,
But that would terrify me because they'll do,
They'll cast somebody from Twilight in it because they're marketable.
It'd be James Wan's Babadook.
All sorts. Well, that I'd be all right with.
I would be cool with.
See, I didn't like Mama, and I like this, and I feel like for the exact right reasons if you see them side by side.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
Because Chastain never played the bass in Babadook. And that's why.
Which Elric used as a trivia question a couple of nights ago.
I did. Oh, that's right, I did.
At the screening of Warlock.
Oh, Warlock, yeah. So that's one we can both talk
screening.
about.
Yeah.
I thought you were less impressed. I thought Warlock held exactly as good as I remember it being. It was as good.
The Julian Sands movie. That was the sequel.
Julian Sands. It was played a Jim.
Steve Miner directed
Richard E. Grant, Steve Miner, and David Toohey wrote it. Now I will say this: Lori Petty.
Oh wow!
The humor certainly dates, but it's still pretty funny. But the setup, what's funny about it is, and we're going to talk about child obsessions. This is a movie I really liked as a kid. The things that terrified me when I was a kid about it, the number one image I remembered is the Amish man's eyes bleeding. And as a kid, that's scary. And now it's just like nothing. I mean, your pulse doesn't race at all. You're just watching an Amish guy with bleeding eyes, which is like totally normal. So
I think they were Mennonite, Elric.
Oh, were they Mennonites?
I think so.
Right, they don't believe in technology? Okay.
I don't know. Maybe they were Amish. I should have paid closer attention.
Actually, if you know that answer without researching it, we will give you something. But no, I thought Warlock was still really fun. And I was sitting next to said person, Jarrett, who we were just talking about before. And he told me that he had been approached about 8 years ago about remaking it for a studio. They pitched his ideas. It never took place. But one thing that crossed my brain as we're watching it is like, it seems like the easiest film in the world to remake because all you do is you just scratch the humor. You make it a really scary Warlock movie set in the contemporary with some. Because back then, as everyone was saying, like that and Terminator and all these movies were about time travel, but in the current contemporary setting. So the thing comes to our time. Scanners, not scanners, Transfers, sorry.
All right.
So you get that side, but the humor, some of the humor is actually pretty good. Some of it's pretty dated and goofy. You were less impressed.
Yeah. It was weird for me because Warlock was one of these ones that I remembered so fondly from my youth. And I loved it when I was a kid and I used to watch, we owned it and I used to watch it over and over. And for me, what's weird is I remember a scene that's not even in there.
Could it be the sequel?
Yeah, are you thinking because
is it him with black blood coming out of his mouth?
No.
Oh, okay. I was
the
looking
scene
for that.
I remember is where he the original roommate with the ring, the Scorpio ring and everything, he kisses him. Well, he doesn't kiss him. He bites out his tongue. I remember him cooking the tongue. I remember seeing the tongue on a pan.
I think so too. You know what though? Here's the thing. We just watched a 16 millimeter print and it was from Australia.
Maybe it
had
Hoyt's
before it. And so you never know. You never know what could have maybe been censored.
That's definitely in one of them. I feel like it's.
See, I swear you.
He bites off the tongue though, but he definitely bit it off, and I'm sure he cooked it.
Yeah, and
I think you're probably right.
In this version, he bit the tongue out. You didn't actually see anything. You saw him look like he was kissing the guy. You saw a little bit of blood come out,
and then it cut. Well, it had a match cut to something cooking. Yeah, like a clipper.
But I, for some reason, had this vivid memory of seeing the tongue.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah, and I was.
Hey, I have a memory of seeing Crawl in 3D, so suck it. But I do think childhood obsessions are fascinating because I think a lot of the things we watch, we remember.
Yeah.
And especially at that age, and especially scary things, because maybe we blinked for a second because we were scared, or it's endlessly interesting how we remember those kind of films.
But I also, the scene where he's cooking the unbaptized child's fat.
That was crazy.
I remember that being a lot longer, and it cuts to it for a second. It just looks like a pool of like boiling milk, but in my mind, it's like lumpy and curdled. So bizarre.
I mean, Julian Sands' performance and stuff, that's the stuff that kind of dates it, just the way they look.
Yeah.
But I do think it would be really fun. Like, that would be a cool challenge to be like, I'm going to make Warlock scary as shit. And these two people running through time. I felt like it needed more curses. Like, I was kind of shocked because he curses her, Laurie Petty, with this thing where she ages 20 years a day, which is awesome. That's the only person he curses in the movie. And you're like, wouldn't it be cool if the book pages, instead of 3, were in like 10 places, and each one he had to go and put different hexes on people?
Yeah.
Right.
And to me, that would be a scarier and more creative.
We have to cut down on the driving with the Cro-Magnon man scenes. So
I have a pitch for you. If you're listening to our show and you happen to be a fan and made certain franchises, Final Destination, Warlock. So it'll be him doing hexes on people who've cheated death.
Right.
Not saying that you are listening, but if you are.
That's interesting. I was going to say there should have been a Warlock versus Wishmaster. I feel like that would be a good little fight.
See, Warlock just didn't hold up for me. It was weird because I remember it so fondly from my kid, and I remember my youth, and I remember thinking that it was so funny. And we were watching it. And what's weird is I also recall it as like a big budget explosion, special effect laden feature.
He's flying. What more do you want?
He's flying, but he's like Julian Sands standing perfectly still. And then they're just moving him around the screen. It was very awkward.
I was super impressed.
It was still fun to go back and rewatch, but I can't say that I'm now like, oh, it's a great movie. It's a movie.
Yeah. I need to see
awesome
the sequel. Because, I've seen the sequel, but I need to see it again.
I remember that one more than anything, I think.
Well, because the thing with him spitting the black blood, I thought that was in the first one. I was like, I remember he spits black blood, and it wasn't. So I'm assuming it's in the sequel.
Yeah, I think it might be 2. And there is a 3 as well.
Really?
But Julian Sands isn't in 3, and it's awful.
So in addition to Warlock, I also I went back and watched The Raid, because next Tuesday I get to go to the Raid 2 press screening. So
Not a horror movie.
So why are we talking about The Raid? It's not even part of the genre.
Oh, frick you guys.
Do you want to change can we change our podcast name then, if you're going to do it? We're going to call ourselves The Extreme Cast. Welcome to The Extreme Cast, where we talk about action films.
In addition to that, I went back and rewatched Ginger Snaps, because last night I recorded commentary for the Scream Factory Blu-ray release.
Whoa.
They had me do like a little panel with like Axel Carolyn and Heidi Martinuzzi, and we discussed what it was like to be a prepubescent female horror fan for a couple of hours. So that was fun. And then the big one that I saw this week, which I was totally psyched about, I saw Nurse 3D.
Oh, boy.
So,
did you see it in 3D?
I did not. It was on VOD, so I got it on VOD.
See, I thought about watching on 3D, but I figured maybe it's fun on 3D. I don't know.
I can't say that there was a great many scenes that were like 3D heavy. It wasn't the type of movie where there were things constantly being thrown at you. I think that the 3D was definitely like a gimmick. I'm not sure if it was...
Was it breast shots in 3D?
She never put on clothes.
Okay.
I mean, like, she was just pretty much like allergic to pants the entire movie. And
me and Rob now have to leave this podcast to go watch a movie.
No, we're going to wait and we'll watch it in 3D.
Okay.
I have to say, she is...
But it never came out. What the fuck? That movie just like never came to LA. Like, I kept waiting and week after week and it wouldn't come to LA.
Well, it's on Amazon right now. You can rent it for like $5.99.
But I mean in 3D is what I mean. Like, it never came.
We'll watch it at my 3D TV.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It is the greatest, worst movie I have ever seen. Like, she is either the greatest actress in the world or the worst. And
she is interesting. I don't think she's definitely not the worst, because I've seen her, in Boardwalk Empire and stuff. Yeah. But she's kind of unhinged. She's like Asia Argento. She has a similar style, which is kind of like there's weird language stuff. Yeah. There's weird sexuality, but she's a comet of a person.
And what's even wackier about the movie, and this isn't a spoiler, but she narrates it. But apparently, this is where it gets weird. Out of here. The whole movie is a narration of her telling the story. But apparently, she was not able to sustain the monologues that she would have to do to tell the story. So it's narrated by a completely different voice.
Yeah,
and then it cuts to her acting.
I have an explanation for that, I think. Yeah. Because one of my trivia teammates edited the trailers for the movie. If you do a little research, our friend Garrow edited the trailers. If you do a little research, the original log line for the movie, like when they were filming it, the plot synopsis is completely different than the plot synopsis for the movie now, which essentially makes it out to be a whatchamacallit, like a single white female stalking
That's
thing.
what it is.
Point being, that stalking element was never part of the original movie. She was just crazy and killed people, but she happened to hook up with this chick. The rumor is they changed the movie in post-production and they put voiceover in to add that stalking element.
But they didn't get Paz to do the voice.
I don't know if they did. That's the thing. I think
could have been in her contract that if they wanted that, she would have to get paid a bunch more, and maybe they didn't.
Yeah,
I think
it's
like,
a completely different voice. It's nowhere.
Oh,
that's what I heard. Like Garrett was telling me when he was watching it, he thought it was a temp thing that just for the time being, but that's the voice they went with.
Yeah.
But
it's bizarre.
If you think about it, if that voice wasn't there, it wouldn't really appear like she was stalking her, right?
No, she'd just be killing people.
Exactly. So that's the interesting is they changed the narrative and the plot of the movie by adding this voiceover. They made it into a different movie.
I wish I'd untied her from my bedroom to bring her with us tonight so we could talk, because I would love to ask her about it.
Well,
as we're leaving, as the credits were rolling and the movie was done, Dave looks at me and he goes, in 20 years, they are going to teach classes on her acting. And it's true because it's so perplexing. It's like Nicolas Cage where you're just like, I can't tell if it's put on or if it's real. It's either genius or
but she must have known
batshit.
that she could go batshit in a role like that, right? Like you're doing a film called Nurse 3D. You know you can go there.
Because every single delivery she does, every delivery is so awkward and so off and so unnatural and
Had the director
grating.
made anything before? Because that's also
totally.
part of a performance.
It wasn't anything major, though.
He did. Yeah, I don't know offhand. But like, are you talking like Showgirl style where it's just all the dialogue seems a little like...
It's not. It's like Verhoeven times 500.
Wow.
Where it's like, it's just so uncomfortable that you just... Like in Showgirls, it's subtle, a little subtle. In this, it's just like, oh my God, like the whole movie is
Judd
just
Nelson's in this movie?
wacky.
Holy shit.
And uncredited, I think Kathleen Turner, right?
Oh, I don't know.
She's the head nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's the head nurse.
But she's not credited for it, which I thought was kind of funny.
And there's this weird, almost kind of, it's like everyone falls into these weird kind of, and it makes sense because it's got like a pulp lead in where everything looks like a pulp book cover. And then the plot is obviously supposed to kind of mimic an old like pulp novel.
Yeah.
But it's just got these weird kind of caricature-esque characters in it. Yeah, it's just strange.
Bad news, guys. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to watch this movie because the director made Highlander Endgame.
Yeah.
He ended the franchise.
What else did he make?
He just
didn't
stuff that I
do
remember.
much. He did
Animals, something called Animals.
Oh, Animals. That's the one I was thinking of.
And he did a Sleepy Hollow episode. And something called The Day.
Yeah.
Oh, The Day.
I wasn't familiar with any of it. But I highly recommend it just because, as I said, it's the
group
best.
film? Like to watch it with people?
Entertaining.
Yes, it is the best worst movie I've ever seen. It is amazing. And yeah, it's just epic. And then as a preview for next week, I just got Blue Monkey on VHS.
I saw that cover. That looked pretty crazy. I've never heard of it.
It's from the 80s. I remember it fondly from my youth. It was pretty much, it's like a drug film where all these people start getting addicted to this like super, crazy drug. It was like an 80s movie.
Sounds like Blue Sunshine too.
It is. But in the end, you find out where the drug's coming from and it's crazy and disturbing. But yeah, it's very much kind of a 80s drug.
Is there a
movie.
blue monkey in it or is that the name of the drugs?
I think it's the name of the drugs.
Ooh.
There is definitely not a monkey.
Okay.
So
there should be.
Yeah, there aren't enough good monkey
monkeys
movies.
make everything better.
Yeah.
At least I don't recall a monkey. I haven't seen it since I was a kid. So for all I know, there is a monkey.
I've done seen some good movies.
What'd you see?
Or a mixture. For one, I'm going to start with this. This is me. We don't always tell you when we do bad things here or when we do things that we like aren't, usually we prep for our guests. Mm-hmm. But one thing I'm positively ashamed of now was not having seen Room 237 when we had Rodney Asher on way back. We did a show with him. It was because I think it was just hitting a couple theaters and I couldn't get it in time.
It wasn't on VOD.
It wasn't on VOD.
Screeners.
And so we, but I knew, I know The Shining inside out like anyone. And so it was a fun interview, but I just saw it, I told Rob, I just saw it the other day and I fucking ecstatically loved it. And part of that love is my love of The Shining, but the other part isn't actually so much about his documentary as it is about the love of the obsession with cinema in general. Any film. It could have been about Vertigo. Could have been. And so it's not so much that where some people I know, and even you guys maybe were critical, yeah, these theories are kind of bullshit, whatever kind of thing. That's not for me what it was about. For me, it was about the fact that anyone would have theories because they've watched a film 1,000 times.
Right.
And that behavior that gets with the hypnotic rhythm of something. And I thought it was beautifully made. I mean, I was just, even though of course, yes, he's just assembling footage and theories and stuff. But for me, it just really, I got lost. I didn't feel it was a documentary. I don't think it's a documentary. I feel like it's something else. It's one of the, more like an experimental film or something. But the main reason that I couldn't stop thinking about it was that incredible score, which for me trumped all the scores last year. Like,
yeah, it's the best thing about it.
It trumped Maniac. And so I went to your house. You lent me the CD of it, and I haven't stopped listening to it for the last week. And it's it's just a beautiful, beautiful score. I'm going to now call myself Team Minotaur. The most ludicrous part of the whole movie, where the woman thing. That's one part I didn't get in. But there's certain theories in there that are fascinating. Not because it's not a normal movie, and that's the thing about The Shining. It's made by a person who is not normal. His IQ being what it is, it's frightening. To think that he would even make a movie like The Shining means there's stuff in there. Not necessarily everything that they found, but stuff like about the Indians, stuff about the Holocaust. I'm sure some of those little things like the numbers of rooms.
I believe all the Apollo stuff.
And the Apollo stuff's just interesting. Now, for those, we talked on briefly, but he believes, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if I said this to you when I saw you, but one thing they don't touch on in the film, if you haven't seen it, I think it's Netflix streaming.
Yeah, it is.
One of the things they don't talk about, there's a lot of great evidence that might indicate that perhaps Stanley Kubrick had helped fake the video of the moon landing, had on stage 237, and that because America did go to the moon, but they couldn't actually film it, and so they ended up enlisting this guy who would make sense. But the reason they're also saying that Jack and Shelley's conversations are really about Jack not being able to tell her what he's been working on.
Exactly.
Some of that seems like a little far-fetched, but Danny's wearing an Apollo 11 sweater at the exact moment where he
rises and everything. Yeah.
But I'll tell you the reason what really stuck with me after the film ended, I didn't really think about it, and I thought, you know what's so interesting is the fact that Kubrick left America when he did and never came back. Ever. Ever. A Brooklyn boy who loved America, and there's a certain point of his career where he moves to London and he becomes hermetic and never moved back, which really, and that wasn't in the documentary. And afterwards I was thinking, oh shit. Like, if you couldn't tell anyone about a major cover-up that you were involved in with the U.S. government, you would leave America.
Wow.
And so, I mean, you would, because you don't want to be, you'd have this. We're not talking about saying light. We're talking about if you went out in an interview, I faked the moon landing, that would major walls would crumble. You know what I mean? And it's such a big deal. It's such a big, especially in the Cold War, in the race with Russia to get to the moon. So anyway, I thought that was really fascinating. I think, a lot of Kubrick's hermetic tendency, it's unlikely because any cover-up's very hard to actually stay covered up.
Yeah.
So it's probably not true. But there's a lot in there that was very compelling to me.
It's fun to theorize.
Yeah.
Before you jump to your next one, I have a small correction, which actually plays into our topic tonight. So Blue Monkey, as I mentioned, I'd seen it when I was a kid. And since I was just sitting here talking about it, I pulled up the plot, and apparently there's no drug use in it.
So you must have been thinking Blue Sunshine.
I must have been.
But you've got the cover of Blue Monkey.
But Blue Monkey, I also saw, which is about insects, but for some reason, I have melded the two films together in my brain from kid.
That's perfect.
I know the title Blue Monkey, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's about, and now that I'm reading the plot on the internet, I'm remembering it. It's about an insect that bites people and it starts spreading that way. And it grows because kids feed it. And that's about all I remember. But for some reason, I think I melded it with Blue Sunshine because I remember them somehow the insect became a drug, or it was leaking some secretion that they were using as a drug. But apparently that part never existed in my brain, or it never existed in the movie. So
Blue Sunshine's fun though.
Yeah, so
I like that film.
I'll let you know next week what the actual plot of Blue Monkey
watch it.
is.
You watch it and tell us. Anyway, so I really recommend it. And the reason I didn't watch it, to be perfectly honest, I had heard great things about Rodney and stuff. It was just because I love The Shining so much. It's my favorite, basically my favorite movie. And
I don't feel as strongly about the doc as you do.
Yeah, well, I was just kind of okay, some crazy people going on.
Because I made a doc, and we'll get into that later with the hard docs.
But that's what I'm saying, though. I don't think it's a documentary, because a documentary is based on fact. This is a film. It's almost like a fan film about people's love of The Shining.
Okay, I'll buy that.
And so because of that, I felt like it had... The way it was made is about as good as I've ever seen someone make a film like that, because it's so hypnotic. Usually people don't try to... with documentaries about horror films, I've never seen one ever that tries to make it like a film. So this was a film that wasn't trying to go, hey, now here's a talking head. It's just like, boom, here's imagery. Here's a soundtrack. And so it was very interesting way to, almost like if you were being brainwashed, like, hey, now I'm going to brainwash you and give you these weird theories. So anyway, I loved it, but not in the way that I love The Shining. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I was worried it was going to ruin The Shining.
No, it's interesting to see, but I don't know. I'm not as big a fan of it.
Some of those still frames were very compelling where they go backwards.
Oh, yeah.
There's one of Jack. It's just the timing of it. But anyway, you watch that. Anyway, I'll rush through a couple. Plus one, Becca had seen it. I watched on Netflix Instant. I thought the first 30 minutes was really compelling, like a really interesting Twilight Zone setup. And then once it became a horror film, I found it completely just stupid. They weren't able to pull off what they'd set up because it's these teen films, and there's so many of them where your main three characters are pretty decent, but every other character is a cartoon. It's like, come on, just shade the partygoers as somewhat
I kept
real.
calling it, that's the poor man's Michael Cera, that's the poor man Aziz Ansari.
Yeah,
but
it's a shame.
Still, I liked it. My only problem with it was that the main character, who I think you're supposed to be
the Purge guy.
Yeah, that I think you're supposed to be cheering for him to get the girl the entire time because that's like, what they're aiming for. But he was a horrible person, and I was like, I hope you burn in hell.
Yeah,
and so
it's pretty strange.
I had no feelings for him.
Yeah, no, exactly. It had some issues, but I think the setup's good, and it seems like some people really like it.
It had some innovativeness to it. So.
But I definitely like the treatment of time and stuff. Talked about Warlock already. Finally, we rewatched The Hills Run Red, which I haven't seen since knowing Dave, who's been on thing. And was
back in.
I saw it like
New
on
Zealand?
VHS when it came out, or maybe it was DVD, early DVD. And I liked it. I think it's a very well. Like the thing about the film, which I thought was interesting, is it's the kind of subject matter where I wouldn't normally, and those kind of movies that were coming out at the time that I wasn't that interested in, like people making. But it's so well made. Like he does a really good job with very B material. It could have very easily been more like a Wrong Turn. But it's not. It's elevated, that stuff, but it's in the visual. The only criticism I'd have is part of me would rather watch the movie they're making. You know what I mean? Like that crazy lost 70s movie. I almost wish Dave would make a feature out of that movie.
Right.
But no, it's cool. It was cool to see it again. And it's really well made. I'm not just saying that because we know him.
I love it. I think it stands out because the killer is really iconic and cool looking, and it's in a glut of time where we don't get a lot of slasher movies. I look at that mask and that design and everything, I'm like, oh, that's cool, and we haven't seen that kind of killer in a horror movie lately. I mean, this is coming on the heels of like the whole torture porn thing. So I like the killer, and I like a lot of the twists. There's like 2 or 3. There's one significant one that I think is the best of the whole movie, but there's 2 or 3 along the way that I as a seasoned horror fan did not see coming, and I thought elevate it to a little bit better than your average.
And if you haven't,
movie.
and if you like that period where urban legends and Valentine, all those movies were being made, this one, if it slipped through, you'll enjoy going back and checking it out because it's perfect in that way. Okay, I'll rush through this next one, and the next one's one of the best films I've seen of the year. It's on VOD. Highly recommend it. I know it's Tarantino's number 1 of the year. Big Bad Wolves is really fun, and not for everyone. And here's the thing: if you loved Killer Joe, you'll probably love Big Bad Wolves. Because Killer Joe is my favorite film of that year. The humor is so black.
Love Killer Joe?
I don't know. I don't know if you'd like it at all because the humor is so black. And it's not dark humor where people go, haha, it's dark humor. No, it's black humor, which means it's to the point where you almost don't know if you're allowed to laugh. Because, they're dealing with, a child rapist killer potentially, and they're just interviewing them. And I won't go into the details all. I think maybe you might like this one a little more than that. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was really cool, a lot of fun. Not really a horror film so much as kind of fringe. Black comic thriller, but really good. And the one the one that I thought about a lot was... because I had mixed feelings about it. I watched The Town That Dreaded Sundown, the Blu-ray from Scream Factory, which I won at trivia.
Nice.
I'll say this about it: it's the most tonally inconsistent film I've seen in my life.
Yes,
and I've seen some pretty tonally inconsistent films. Unfortunately for me, I love consistent tones. It's like the thing I look for most in a movie. But that said, the stalking scenes in it are better than any stalking scene in Friday the 13th, the entire franchise.
It's weird.
Magical, and they are so scary. The way he breathes in and out in the mask. It's the best performance I've seen of a masked killer in a way. I think those scenes are so beautifully made, and then the scenes with the cops are so stupid and so retarded, like people in slow motion driving off into a lake going, oh gosh, it's Dukes of Hazzard crap.
We had this conversation at Jump Cut that night that you were talking about it, because that wasn't just that film. It was kind of a trend at the time to do this weird mix of like brutal horror with comedy. Because if you look at like Last House on the Left, you're interspersing Krug and his team doing these horrible atrocities with like Keystone Cops.
Yeah.
And so, it's
I hate that.
It's weird. Yeah,
mix.
it's weird.
Like I get if it wasn't them only, but it's a bummer. But what it made me realize, because I didn't think about the film or who made it beforehand. It also is obvious, fan killer, obvious precursor to Jason, just unbelievable. Yeah. But I started reading up about Charles B. Pierce, and then I realized, I've seen these other movies by him, and they all suffer, but also are incredible in the same ways, because Legend of Boggy Creek and The Evictors all have the same thing, which is they are literally, I was tweeting about it, they're literally, I think, the best evocation of place I've ever seen. Like the sense of place, like by hiring, and I read about how he worked and hiring all the extras as locals. Yeah. He'd hang out at gas stations just waiting to find people that looked a certain way for Boggy Creek, and just casting all these people and making his films in rural places. We might have touched on this when we had Cinefamily here.
Yeah, we did.
But I found him, to be honest, I straight away thought, man, a biopic about that guy would be fascinating, because do you know Legend of Boggy Creek he made for $60,000 on his own, shot it in the swamp of what part of Arkansas, whatever that is, and it made $25 million.
Wow.
And at that time, he said to everyone that it was going to win an Oscar. It didn't win an Oscar, but it did. It did influence things like Blair Witch and a lot of them. But The Evictors has the same thing. It's just like the films feel so authentically of a place, town that's dread Sundown. Like, man, you just feel like that place. You've walked those streets.
Yeah, Texarkana.
I really think he's a very special, important filmmaker, despite my issue with these like the tonal problems in the movies, which, again, is often just people not really, knowing how to make a film from start to end.
Yeah. Somebody should do a doc on him.
Yeah, it was very, I know he's dead, but reading up about him is good. And I was thinking one of the things about it is that I miss that. I know we talked about When Cinefam, but I really miss films that evoke a place that's not LA, that's not Vancouver, that feels like an authentic place where they really get under skin. And the most recent one it came out this week that definitely does that is Almost Human, even though they're pretending it's a different place.
Right.
But it definitely, because they went home and they shot in their own backyard, and it's fun. There's something I really love about indie horror where it gets that, and that's something that I wish we'd see more of.
Well, number one about Town of Dread Sundown, how amazing does that Scream Factory Blu-ray look?
Oh yeah, it looks incredible.
It's wonderful.
The colors too of the dresses the girls wear when they're running through the night, and the trombone murder.
Yes. I think my roommate walked by and he's like, there's no reason this movie should look this good.
Yeah, no,
like, you're right. I agree with you, but it's amazing. There's that. And number two, I could have sworn, I wonder if it was somebody that invited me or got an email. As we speak this week, there is a test screening of the remake happening right now.
Yeah, somebody did tell me about that. Is it
curious?
Do you know anything about it? Like, is it meant to be the exact same story?
No. The movie exists in the movie. It's a whole. It's what's his name? The American Horror Story guy, Ryan Murphy.
Oh.
And it takes place now, but it's kind of a meta approach where I guess they're doing a screening of the Town that dread Sundown in this town. And I guess
bad things start happening.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
I know they use Fangoria in it because I signed release papers. So there's at least 2 instances that Fangoria appears.
That's the thing. They're going meta with. I'm just curious, like, because that's one that I couldn't imagine being remade. But
I'm all for that, and that's something that we've never really done a pure remake show.
But
we will at some point.
We should at some point.
I'm just like all about doing something different.
Yeah, me too.
Don't try to, even The Evil Dead was enough for me to have done something different.
You were tweeting.
You got rid of Ash. Yeah, it really, because somebody was talking about sequels, and when I read that, I was just like, you know what? All I want, even if it's good or bad, I just want you to go in a new direction.
Right.
And if you try to remake, like literally Van Sant or whatever, it just, it's not going to work.
Have you guys seen a Soderbergh cut of that yet?
I haven't watched it, but I looked at the idea.
Yeah. I just watched the shower scene because that's the only sequence that's embeddable, and it's just as pointless as the remake itself.
Yeah.
It's kind of, he laid one image over the other one, and
he didn't just cut it like a normal film.
The first part he did. I only watched the shower scene, but the first part, it's kind of like he cut it like a normal film.
Well, you should tell them what that is. We're assuming anyone knows what the hell we're talking about.
Oh, Psycho. Psycho remake. Well, Steve Soderbergh just did a little weird experiment where he edited together the original Hitchcock and that one.
And he changed it to black and white.
Yeah, so the remake's in black and white, and then it's just weird. I don't understand what
But
what
for the shower
of.
scene, he laid ghost images over top. So you see both the new Marion and the old Marion together side by side going through every single motion.
I mean, Vince Vaughn was such an improvement on Anthony Perkins.
Oh my God, don't even.
That's the
there.
problem with that movie. Isn't even the remake, the shot for shot. It's more like the crazy. Some of the casting was just so bad.
Yeah.
Like William H. Macy's great cast. That's the one thing where you walk away going, Viggo. I didn't have any problem with Viggo Mortensen, but it's just like Vince Vaughn. I do not want to watch in that role, and I do not want to watch Anne Heche in that role.
Yeah.
And Julianne Moore didn't bother me either, actually. But it's just such a. But that's cool. Look, hey, Soderbergh has some time. He's retired. He's a film nerd. He's been hanging out to make these fan videos and YouTube. So let's let him go crazy.
There's far more you can do than that. But anyway,
childhood obsessions. Dun, 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 dun.
Are you ready? Are you ready for the topic?
I just gave it
obsession.
Part of the reason that I because Elric threw that term out, childhood obsessions, when it comes to horror, because obviously we get into this stuff at a young, impressionable age. Mm-hmm. But the reason I thought it was important to make that part of the topic is because, as you're going to hear from Paul when he comes in and myself, the reason we made our respective documentaries, I did Psycho Legacy, he did Beware the Moon, the one on Nightmare, American Werewolf in London. The reason we did it is because we were just so obsessed with those films. There was just something inexplicable about it that we just had to tell that story, had to tell a story about the making of that movie. And to me, I think that's a powerful thing when you're young, getting into the genre and the sort of, for me, going back to New York this past week has been interesting because, my folks are moving, so I had to go through a lot of my old stuff. So I found, all of my old Fangorias, and then I found other stuff that reminded me of how I used to be. I mean, it's hilarious. I had I found a couple of notebooks that I had. This is part of my obsession. And I can't remember what, I must have been super young, but one of my notebooks had stickers, like those little 50 cent
the glittery ones that you would get out of the machine. You put 2 quarters in and then it would spit it out.
You'd spit it out. Yeah, there was a whole line of horror ones, and I remember I think Michael Felsher, the guy that does a lot of the Red Shirt Pictures stuff for Scream Factory, I almost want to say that he has almost a complete collection, or he has an uncut sheet or something like that. Ooh. I know he's posted pictures of the stickers, but I have one where it's I have stickers in a book. And in big red handwriting, all caps, because I couldn't barely write, I wrote "horror rules" at the bottom. And I posted this picture on my Facebook saying, insight into the mind of little G. This is what I was thinking as a young kid. So that was one of I was always obsessed with making, I don't know, I guess it's a collection thing, making books.
Oh, I did that too.
Yeah.
All the time.
Book of stickers. And then I had another book of newspaper articles, which I miss so much. I mean, that's completely extinct now. But, before you check a movie on the internet or when it's coming out or whatever, it was just so exciting seeing the advertising and seeing the theaters that it was going to play near you. And, oftentimes, people don't remember. I mean, I guess they sort of do this online, but every couple of weeks, they change the advertising campaign to kind of I posted a Christmas thing for Chucky. For Child's Play, the first Child's Play, and it was just before Christmas, watch Chucky do it. And first of all, you're like, do what?
Yeah.
What's this, oh, and it's a knife over a turkey or whatever, so it's supposed to be for Thanksgiving weekend. So I find that whole thing fascinating. So part of my compulsion was collecting and putting horror in books. I just, cutting out stickers, cutting out.
You guys probably had a lot more access to horror things, paraphernalia, besides Fangoria. I think Fangoria is the only horror thing that would have made it to New Zealand, all the movies and VHS and stuff, but in terms of collectability, there weren't toys, there weren't.
Yeah. How would you get a Fangoria?
Fangoria was in comic book shops.
Okay,
so I read that at a pretty young age, or at least flipped through the ones there until I could, buy one. But there were definitely that collectible thing that I always find. So I'll see a Freddy toy at your house where you change his head and mask, and I was like, I didn't see that kind of thing emerge until Todd McFarlane things. So
yeah,
wow.
So
and quite
that was
frankly,
late 90s.
Yeah.
It was, but those were hard to get. Until when I was a kid, there weren't really hard toys. I mean, I brought my Freddy doll with me, the talking Freddy doll.
There were horror kids toys. Which I'll talk about in a sec because I've got a whole bunch on my list. But it wasn't you couldn't get the Nightmare on Elm Street play set now with
No.
changeable shoes.
The McFarlane toys thing I remember being a huge deal.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was.
I was an adult by that point, but I remember it's like, oh my God, he's doing Movie Maniacs. Like for the first time ever, I can get an action figure of Freddy and Jason and Leatherface. And I remember the deal was they were so hard to get because nobody, like I remember hunting. It was a toy hunt from KB stores, which no longer exists anymore, but going from KB's on Long Island, looking for the bloody variant of Leatherface.
They had them at GameStops. At the time I was in Blacksburg, Virginia I was an undergrad in college, and I remember going, the only place they had them in town was GameStop, and I remember driving an hour to a GameStop in Roanoke because I wanted the Ghostface variant, because there was the one that said Scream, and then there was the one that said Ghostface.
Yeah, I got them both.
Yeah, I do too.
That's the fun. I mean, that was also part of, that was, again, that goes into the thrill of the hunt thing. It was like, now we have another thing to hunt and look for. The Movie Maniacs was that, I went to like 3 different KBs because they did the whole thing where like only one Leatherface per box was the bloody version of it or something like that. And I remember finding it at KB, and the clerk was like, "We sell this here? This is, So it was a big deal. That was the first time that toys were marketed. I know it's hard to imagine now because now there's an action figure and a model kit and just of every single monster you can think of. And this is excluding, the Universal monsters and stuff. Because I know there were like model kits that you'd paint and stuff like that back in the early days. But that wasn't part of my childhood. Just being
able to get like a thing action figure. I remember when that came out through the McFarlane Movie Maniacs, that was my favorite one, just because it was like, this piece of art sitting on my shelf, the little spider head, was just amazing to have.
Yeah, there weren't many toys. There's this Freddy doll. I can't remember when it came out or why I have it. And thank God that my parents were just oblivious and didn't know anything, because this is my talking Freddy doll. You pull a string.
What did he say?
Let's be friends.
Oh.
All right, truth be told, Robert Englund's actually here. All right, and our guest is Robert Englund.
That was him. Let's see what else he
Unfortunately, you have to pull a string.
Oh, yeah, he's laughs a lot. That's all I'm getting.
I directed 976 Evil.
Now listen, I want you to look at this. He's saying, "Let's be friends." This is a pedophile child murderer.
Yeah. People forget that about that character.
He wants you to be friends with him. Yeah, and you pull the hat off and he's got.
But the funny thing about this toy is he's taller than the guy who played it in the remake, which is kind of incredible.
I like that he comes with removable hat. It's very Barbie-esque.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do you guys have
this is the only toy like this that I remember at that time?
Do you have films that you watched, like not so much necessarily even horror, but like what were like ones that you watched to the point where we're talking about obsession? So there's that difference between, like, I remember when I saw The Shining at a young age, I loved it, but I wouldn't say I was obsessed by it. But there was movies I watched every birthday. And for me, birthdays were the key thing. Like, so the most watched movies, I won't even go into them. My Science Project. I have no idea how many times I saw
my son. With the apes in the basement?
Yeah, no, dinosaurs and everything. Okay, Dennis Hopper's the history teacher or whatever, or science teacher, and they go back into time. The Black Hole with Robert Forster, Anthony Perkins, the space thing.
That's
Krull.
not horror, Elric.
No, they're all border. They're all
we
fringe.
We should just call this the extreme cast.
No, it's sci-fi. Black Hole, sci-fi horror. Come on, Krull and Big Trouble in Little China. Between those, so they're not straight horror. Big Trouble. Probably the most Big Trouble. I think I did like 3 years in a row. I wanted to watch Big Trouble in China on my birthday. So it's weird that I look at those movies now, and especially with My Science Project, I have no idea how that would hold up now. Probably terribly, but it's funny like that. I just wanted to keep like a comfortable blanket. I wanted to keep watching that at that age, and I can't explain why.
Did you have something like that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. My parents, this is probably, well, I guess the statute of limitations has run out, but my parents were the piracy kings of the 80s. And it's before like anybody even really knew about it, and before they started putting copy guard on tapes. So this is like early 80s. We had this rental place in my town called it was like a guy's name, like Kenny's Rental House. And he had all these videotapes and none of them had copy guard on them. So my parents had 2 VCRs and everything that we rented, we copied. So we had like a library to rival Kenny's Rental, like everything they had, we had. And so there were some I could just grab whenever I wanted. And so my list, Watcher in the Woods was a big one for me. It was kind of Disney's venture into a horror film. And it was a weird one because it was about some kids who were playing this game where they were trying to send one of their friends to another realm. And while there, she swapped place with an alien. And it's bizarre.
Betty Davis?
Yeah, Betty Davis plays her mother. And it's creepy as shit. It's like, even though there's an alien involved, you never see the alien. It's just this entity in the woods who causes flashes of lights and whispers and things like that. Bizarre. I used to watch that one over and over. This one's a little bizarre too. Slugs. I loved this movie when I was a kid, and now that I watch it, I have no idea why.
What is it with you and insects?
I don't know. Well, I was an entomology minor in college.
That's right.
Remember?
So that's what's with you and insects. That was a very easy explanation.
Yeah.
Usually you say that to someone, they're like, I don't know. We need therapy
bugs.
to look into
That was
this.
like
guys.
30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. So ticks, slugs, squirm. What else?
I've got piranha on here too. Not insects, but I really liked Joe Dante's piranha when I was the kid.
I remember liking Cameron's one because they flew, they could walk.
They could walk.
They could walk and fly, and I remember that being really cool.
They were just everywhere. Something Wicked This Way Comes was another big one for me. I watched over and over. Pumpkinhead is weird. I remember seeing that one when I was probably in about 6th grade. I was probably about 12 or so. But that one I loved. And Ghoulies.
Yeah, no,
I watched on repeat.
Critters. I should have put in Critters because that's another movie I watched a lot.
I loved Critters.
Like Ghoulies is a lot of fun, but Critters had such rewatchable value.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm looking at a lot of mine were sci-fi horror, which I didn't grow up to necessarily be a big sci-fi horror fan, but at that time.
Critters, Critters
maybe it's the
2,
80s.
I loved Critters. Critters 2 was a big deal for me, going to see it in theaters. I remember that.
And Ryan's going to be...
Ryan Turek from Bloodcast is doing a screening of it at the Cine Family with Mick Garris.
And
we're going to have to get in here at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Another one of mine, it's questionably horror, but heavy metal. And I probably shouldn't have been watching it as a kid, but like my parents, because it was a cartoon, they were like, yeah, fine, whatever. But I mean, it's chocked full of nudity and, melting skulls and things like that. But
it's definitely impressionable.
I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
And it's still like, I watched it on repeat then. I had no clue what I was watching most of the time because it's all just like weird montage-y shit that doesn't really, it doesn't form a complete story a lot of the time. It's almost like an anthology film.
Right.
But I loved it.
And I collected a lot of the possession toys and the possession pinball machine, the possession lotto.
Obviously.
Did you have the possession stickers?
I had the Isabella Johnny late term abortion, subway abortion toy where she,
Now, I have a list of toys, but also magazines because both Mad and Cracked had horror versions of their magazines. So I used to read those. Cracked, was it Cracked Monster Party or Mad Monster Party? I used to get those every month, and that's what I would cut up. I would cut them up and put them into magazines. And I still, when I go back to my parents' house, I have like one of my original Trapper Keepers, which has like puppies on it. But I had glued this sticker of a skull cracked in two, and it says, "I've got a splitting headache" on it. Right. And I used to think it was hilarious when I was a kid, but I just love that it's on like this Trapper Keeper of like puppies and flowers, and then this like open skull.
Yeah. It makes you remember how important Fangoria or magazines were because we didn't have any other way to find out about new things.
Oh my God. I mean,
like that's how we got excited. We saw a photo.
The Terry Teletype was like, it's the modern version of what, the internet
web is. Yeah.
You see a little blurb that just says George Romero is making Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
You're like, what? Another Dead movie? It's amazing. That was always the first thing I looked for in Fango movies.
Yeah, me too. It's interesting.
And you have other toys?
I have toys
I remember they
like
marketed
crazy. So today I put up a picture of my Boglin. And my Boglin I still have just because he's traveled with me everywhere. I took him to college. I took him when I moved to New York.
What the fuck is a Boglin?
Are you fucking serious?
Not only have I never heard of Boglin, I don't even know if I want to hear about a Boglin. Tell me about the Boglin.
I think you may be the Antichrist.
Have you heard of My Pet Monster at least?
It's on my list too.
There you go. Madballs?
I didn't even think Cabbage Patch Dolls made it to New Zealand.
What kind of a kid were you?
Oh my God. What did you guys play with?
I had Star Wars toys. Huh? Well, we were too busy. Okay, I'm going to tell you the truth about...
Get Elric a Madball
I'm not kidding. The truth is, children in the 80s in New Zealand were basically at an early age working for the alien Peter Jackson. And we were basically working on visual effects at a very early age.
I'm pulling up a picture of a Boglin right now. So I swear... Boglin was not a movie, but I swear it was influenced by Ghoulies because Ghoulies was very, very popular with horror youth at the time. Yeah. And then it was maybe 5 years later, if that. It was very close in time that Boglins came out, and Boglins were these little puppets. They were rubber puppets like you'd see in Ghoulies. And here's a picture.
Why didn't
of
anyone make a franchise? Oh, I recognize that. It looks like Shrek.
Yeah, no, they don't all look like Shrek. There was like a lobster one.
Yeah, it comes in that little.
Some of them had pointy ears, and there was I had a fish one too. But I had one of the you could move their eyes back and forth and move their hands around. So they were actually like puppets because they had facial articulation where you could like move their
see. I'm looking
make them blink and things like that.
Why hasn't somebody made this into a movie? This looks like a no-brainer.
That's a good question.
Yeah. They might,
copywriting it.
I mean, that's the thing, because, for me...
It's owned by Mattel.
Yeah, where's Buchler when you need him?
Yeah. And these things were amazing when I was a kid. I had a whole bunch of them, but some of them dry rotted, so which sucks. I guess that's what happens to like rubber and latex toys. But I still have a couple. I still have my fish one, and I have the little one Sponk. I still have. So yeah, those were like my babies when I was a kid. Yeah. And then Madballs is another one.
Madballs we did have, or maybe I got them when I'd come to America. I would visit America,
there was a couple of derivations. There was a couple of alternate ones
the really
too,
ugly
there
ones.
Was there was crazy balls, and there was flying balls, and there was also
shaved balls.
Shaved balls.
I made her say that just now. So.
There was a couple of different options, but Madballs were the most popular, and then I think the other ones were knockoffs of them. But there was one called Slime Balls, and I had a whole bunch of slime balls too, and they had stickers and cards that came with them. So I have my original slime ball stickers too.
You know what's interesting about that?
There was a knockoff toy,
But the slime balls were awesome because they came in different shapes. Like there was one that was like a football shaped, and it looked like you had stuck your fingers into its head.
I remember that. Yeah, they were all sports related, but mutated.
But there was Screaming Mimi was the baseball. Guys, that was one of the original Madballs.
Yeah, they were cool.
So yeah, they were great. And then My Pet Monster, which was he was kind of a cute stuffed monster, but he came with cuffs that you could wear and break, and he was really cute. And then I have a couple more Monsters in My Pocket. Did anybody else have those?
I vaguely remember that.
They were tiny little 2-inch solid colored figures. And it was like you got a werewolf and a witch, and they all had points on the bottom. So you could play each other, like werewolf trumps Hydra, trumps, Goat Man. And I still have all of those. And then Germs was another thing I had, which was these little tiny monsters in test tubes, and they were supposed to be germs. But my favorite out of all of them I had, and I think they still make this, it was a Monster Maker. And it was like an easy bake oven, but I think it was supposed to be for boys. And it came with like this little liquid kit that you would put into a mold. And you could also do insects. It had creepy crawlies too. And you would squirt this juice into the mold, and then you would put it into this like easy bake oven thing. And it would bake these little like latex critters. And it would either be monsters or insects. And I loved them both.
Yeah, I definitely have seen that. Some of these things I've seen because I was before I was even a big movie guy, I was a big comic book guy as a kid. And so I would see a lot of these ads at the back of the comics. Yeah. Like my first comic I ever bought was the first Ghost Rider as a kid. Just walked into what we call a dairy in New Zealand. It's kind of like a 7-Eleven. Yeah. Not quite the same. And I'd never seen comics on a stand. It was the first time. I must have been really young, 6 or 7. And I just picked it up and bought it, and then went home and read this crazy Ghost Rider. But my mom gave me, this is funny. I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and she gave me the first comic of Elric because of my name. So my father named me because of this book series, and they made a comic. Of course, she didn't open it. She just bought me this thing that said Elric, and she goes, "Hey, look, isn't this cool?" And for then that was, I'm not going to say it was my pornography because that's too young to, but there is like a crazy erotic, like backdoor sex scene in this comic book with this character Elric having sex, and like, so, the very pink nipples and white rain, and it's very erotic. And I'm like this kid reading that, and I kept on to that comic forever. And I'm thinking to myself, it's just hilarious that this is a comic book, which, marketed kind of towards children.
Yeah.
Here's the creepy crawly game in case. Oh, it went away. Never mind.
But anyway, so comics, I don't read comics so much anymore. Not that I wouldn't, graphic novels, but comics, and cinema are just so close,
They are. And I'm glad you bring it up because, she mentioned Madballs, and I have a vague memory of Madball comic books. Like the Marvel, I think, did a
really?
Run. Yeah, and it's funny to me. It's like you come up with a toy, which is just a gimmick. It's a baseball that has a face on it. And all of a sudden, a comic book company decides to write all these stories about it, and it's like all these cool little monster stories. But yeah, comic book.
Yeah, here it is.
You found it? Yeah,
you can get them on eBay.
I'm pretty sure there was a cartoon as well at some point.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
I just checked on YouTube, and that seems familiar to me. But comic books were a really pivotal part of my upbringing in terms of learning my morality through Spider-Man comics.
Yeah, and I was saying, we talked about that recently.
But at the same time, it's like, they just tied in so well with the horror genre and the way it's funny. The thing that wraps it up, actually, one of the things I forgot to mention that I saw this week was I picked up Scream Factory's release of Darkman, which I know you screened it at Jump Cut a little while ago. Now, I haven't watched the actual movie. I haven't seen the movie in years, but I did watch all the special features, so I got little clips from it and stuff like that, and I got to hear a lot of the people talk about what Sam Raimi kind of had in mind. And it makes sense to me why I loved that movie as much as I did as a kid when it came out back in 89, 1990, whatever. It's because it's an amalgamation. Sam Raimi was doing an amalgamation of everything that meant something to me. Like Batman had just come out, the Tim Burton movie. Danny Elfman scored Darkman. And it's like, if only Batman was a little darker and like killed people, he'd be perfect. And that's what Darkman is essentially.
Right. And it's like a comic book.
It's like it's a comic book adaptation that's not a comic book. I mean, the rumor has it, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Raimi was trying at that period to make a movie for Thor. He had the rights for Thor. And it fell apart, and he was just like, screw it. I'm just going to create my own comic book character and make that movie, and that's what Darkman ended up being.
I'm surprised he would like Thor.
Yeah, I mean, he apparently grew up with all of them, and I'm glad he got to do Spider-Man of all of them. But, the rumor is that Thor kind of fell apart, and he ended up doing Darkman instead. But I love that Darkman is the epitome of a comic book movie without a comic book source. But also, I revisited all the Universal Monster movies back in October, and just his love of those movies is so evident in it, with the Phantom of the Opera, just the Mummy, like all those kind of like Universal Monster kind of, just like the tortured hero thing fits so perfectly. So to me, it's like, I can't wait to actually sit down and watch Darkman again, but getting little bits and pieces of it, I'm remembering he made this movie for 12-year-old me. Like it was exactly what I wanted to see back then.
And thinking about comic books, the one thing that they have when you're young over movies, and maybe our patience gets less now, it keeps going. So each page is kind of tantalizing. You get to the end of it, you get to the back of the cover, and you go, oh, and you have that moment, and then you have that joy to know, oh, it's the next one comes soon. Yeah. And it keeps going. Unlike a great movie that when it ends, it's over, and the sequels. And so I do think comics are perfect for fueling young imagination, in that way.
Totally.
And they're just cinematic in the pictorial sense. But yeah, comics are huge to like shifting. I wanted to ask you guys, I wrote this down because I was really curious. This is something we've never actually asked because everyone always says, oh, what's the first film that scared you? Or here's what I wanted to know. Oh. What's the first film or that you remember being most scared to see? So not the result of the film, but do you remember like somebody going, hey, we're going to go see inside, and you being like, oh my God, I can't see that because it's too scary. Because that was a powerful film. And this is the biggest difference between America and New Zealand. This is it. I don't know what the ad campaign is. I might have even talked about this before. I don't know what the ad campaign in New Zealand was, but I'd seen Nightmare at that point, which scared the piss out of me.
I know what you're going to say.
Because I probably haven't mentioned it.
Yeah.
For some reason, the ad campaign for House was that it is the most terrifying film ever made.
Sean Cunningham.
Somehow, when that news got to New Zealand, I don't know how or whether it was just through people saying it, but the Ding Dong You're Dead poster with the hand, no one knew it had any humor in it at that point. So they just told me, and people said to other people, I was probably, 12 or 11, and everyone was like, it's R18, so you had to be 18. So I probably couldn't have gone to the theater anyway.
Yeah.
But they said, it's like, I think there was even a story like somebody was so scared they died. It's the scariest movie. So it built up in my head like the scariest movie. And I've got to be honest, when I watched it, it still terrified me. Not to that level, but the monster that came out of the closet thing when got chopped into pieces, that scared me. And what's his name from Night Court as a crazy skull was really terrifying. But not, if I looked back now, obviously it's pitched half comedy. But whatever that marketing ploy was, and again, the reason why this works is because we're in a foreign country. There's no internet.
Yeah.
So there's no message board saying it's not scary, it's dumb. Instead, the word from America, no, this is fucking scary. Get ready, hold on to your hat. And so it worked really well. And I don't think I've had an experience since where I've been scared to go to a movie. I watched it on VHS in the end, but it's still scary. But that, like, I don't even know if I should put this in the player because it's that scary, which I love. I love the idea of that. Maybe what was that the Serbian
film?
I wasn't scared of it, but the fact that it had this, you don't know if you want to see it. For me, it did nothing, but
Yeah. I think for me it was, and it wasn't even, maybe The Exorcist. I remember the hype leading up to that, and it did scare me. And in fact, I remember there was like a live exorcism on some news station that me and my cousin tried to stay up for.
Oh, wow.
And it was just past our bedtime, so we kept passing out. And in the middle of it, like, we're sort of asleep and we're watching it, and we're just terrified. Like, what's going on? Just turn the TV off. Let's go to sleep.
Yeah.
So we didn't even bother watching the live exorcism. But the one I remember, not seeing until I was an adult because of that fear. And I think it's more because I'm just a sensitive person. the talk of Faces of Death.
Oh yeah.
You know, you go to a video store and everyone's like, "This is real."
Yeah.
You know, this is the most screwed up thing you're ever going to see because it's real. You know, and then the rumors are, oh well, some of it's real, some of it's not. I didn't know, but I hadn't seen it until several years ago, like in my 20s or whatever. And I'd known, oh, you see a guy get electrocuted, you see them eat monkey brains, you see all this like fucked up shit. So that's
but there's no narrative context, so it's not scary.
Yeah,
that's the amazing thing about like reality is it's not that scary because it hasn't got a story leading up to it. It's just, oh, somebody's being electrocuted. Now, had they built up who that person was and you felt for them, then you get scared.
There's actually an academic book, I think it's called Faces of Death, but it focuses, or the versions of death, but it focuses on that element, how if you have a Mondo film where you just stack atrocity after atrocity, they're not scary at all.
And they dissipate the power.
It means nothing.
For me, it was like that with Killing of America. We've talked about before. That documentary had a big impact on me. It's just about life. It's pretty heavy.
I have that one, but I haven't watched it.
It's great. It's a great documentary. No. It's much better than the Face of Death type stuff.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was definitely scared to see It's Alive, and I never did. Like, it took me a long time before I finally watched it, just because the ad campaign that we had for it here in the States, it was you saw this like beautiful bassinet and this like idyllic kind of kids music is playing la la. And it's like the camera circles it, and then you see the claw sticking out of the side. Great. And I was tiny when I saw the commercial for that. Scared the fucking shit out of me.
Well, I missed that. You missed that feeling.
Time, I would never watch that movie.
I missed that feeling. I kind of had it with Babadook because some movies you don't know anything about. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the blindness now. But there was a movie. It was a comedy with Dudley Moore about advertising agencies in the 80s. It was him and Daryl Hannah. It's like ad execs. It's a genuinely funny movie. But there's an ad exec who works for a big agency, and he decides that he's living a false life, and he's like, I'm going to start being honest with all my advertising.
The name of this movie is Something People.
Yeah, it is. It's Something People. You look it up while I'm saying. Anyway, it has one of my favorite things ever, which is horror related, where they have this horror film that they're relating, and they have trying to advertise, and they have some shitty campaign that, and then suddenly he goes, no, this is the campaign. And then it just has this great trailer for a horror film. It goes, this movie won't just scare you. This movie will fuck you up for life. And it has this little girl who's like all disturbed for the rest of her life.
Something like Jaguar for men who one-hand jobs from beautiful women.
That's the other one.
Something like that. Yeah.
It's really funny, but the horror part of that is so good because it's like this little girl who's just going to be fucked up for life because it's that scary. And I'm like, that really is a great ad campaign. I wish campaigns would be less. I think the problem now with advertising, and I noticed it for things like You're Next and that, is that they're so focused on getting you to come see the movie by showing you stuff instead of going, oh, what if I just tell you, don't come see this movie? Remember those old campaigns? It's like, don't come see this. Yeah. I like the idea of saying, you shouldn't see this movie. If you don't see one film, don't come to this one. It's just too messed up. You can't go there. It's like, I miss that fun showmanship in advertising that now has just been reduced to, look, here's everything.
Right.
Do you like it? Then come to the movie.
I liked it when they used to say, like, we're having a doctor in the theater. Or, like, I have one of the original Mark of the Devil vomit bags.
I've got one of those, too.
They did it with the re-release documentary, but I have one of the original ones.
Yeah.
But,
I have vomit in mine. So.
But, there's a certain showmanship that went along with it. But, the simple fact that they distributed vomit bags with it when it originally came out made me want to see Mark of the Devil really
because there was actual competition back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because all these films are being made, some in studios, some not in studios, some independent, some at drive-ins. Now there's nothing. Now there's just what the studio makes.
Yeah, pretty
and
much.
then anything that's indie that can't afford any marketing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you're like, fuck. Like, that was such a great golden time of creativity. Even if you go back to I think our second episode where we had the Street Trash, him talking about the ad campaign for Street Trash, that was just amazing.
They had coffee mugs. They made Street Trash coffee mugs that looked like garbage cans.
But what was that story he told us where he put the quotes of the critics, the critics who liked it on one side of the page,
the ones that didn't,
and the one other, and it was just you decide what side of the street are you on. I mean, that's genius. It's like I just kind of need to stay interested in this kind of stuff. You need that stuff occasionally,
I do. I miss the showmanship of it and the way that these things get marketed.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned you were asking us before about films specifically that we obsessed over, and this will be a good leadway into when our guests arise, but. The one, I was big into jumping franchises, but the one film I obsessed over was Stephen King's It.
Ooh.
And I remember it was a point where I'd come home from school every day and I would watch it. Primarily the
like
first
the whole
part.
thing, like 6 hours.
I was more. I didn't like the second half nearly as much as
stopped
the
when
first.
they got old.
Yeah, I like the
when
kids.
they became adults.
I would come home every day and watch this segment with the kids, in particular when they fight it in the sewers. As kids, I had every line of it memorized.
Wow.
You know, this is battery acid.
Do you want it? Do you want it?
Yeah, you know, that whole thing. And, you know, you all taste so much better when you're afraid. It's just like everything about it. And because I was the age of those kids.
Yeah.
And the more, you know, you felt like if a monster ever shows up, I'm going to be prepared to fight it because
my inhaler,
these kids did.
This battery acid.
Exactly. This battery acid you slime. So that was one. I remember that was.
And they're remaking that, right?
Yes.
Supposedly.
I don't know who it is, but I did hear that. And I think it will be a good.
Whoever's in charge of True Detective now is attached to, which I hear.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, now all of a sudden everyone's
Greatest
like,
show ever.
that's
Oh,
all
okay.
right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So
my other
one.
big obsession that I have to mention is Garbage Pail Kids.
Oh, yeah.
Which I don't know if we can consider those horror oriented. They definitely had the gore features.
They're
So
grotesque.
I'll put them in for that. But actually the Killer POV logo was designed by one of the old Garbage Pail Kids artists.
Cool. I didn't even know that. I knew that it was
Joe Simcoe.
Yeah. I didn't realize he was involved in
Could
garbage.
he draw us as Garbage Pail Kids?
I'm sure
How
he
great
could.
a logo would that
Oh my
be?
God.
Us?
Okay, I'll call
Write it down.
him.
Make a note.
That is
Joe.
like genius.
Yeah.
if you're listening.
Did you have Garbage Pail Kids in New Zealand?
I don't think they were sold there, but people would have known what they were from pop culture, and we would have known from comics.
That was a big deal here because we had a big.
How did that happen?
I have no idea.
Like, how would that have gone into the mainstream?
The thing was that it was we had the Cabbage Patch Kids,
Right,
was this
yeah.
wholesome, regular doll. Young girls were obsessed with having a baby, which is kind of a weird message to send to.
It's
young
still,
girls back then.
see, I don't get that either because like my mom rolled into town a couple of days ago and the first thing she wants to buy for my 11-month-old is a baby. And I'm like, why? Let her be the baby for a little bit, but
like,
continue.
give me 16 years before this happens.
Yeah,
for
I don't know.
Christ's sake. But no, so that was a massive pop culture thing in America in general. Everyone's obsessed with Cabbage Patch
You could
dolls.
comb their hair. I had a Cabbage Patch Kid doll. You could comb their hair. They came with all these different clothes. You could buy pets for them. It was cute.
But what made it exciting was then there was some deviants like us.
Yes.
Because
I had the Garbage Pail Kids too.
Yeah, that decided, what if we made stickers that like spoofed and corrupted these versions?
Let's
So
put shitty
So it
gum
started
in
as
it.
stickers
yeah, it's stickers. Cause,
before there was a toy.
yeah,
There
there
weren't toys. They were just cards.
It was those cards, trading cards.
Oh, I thought it was
always
toys.
And you
trading
got
cards.
shitty gum with it, but you just threw the gum away.
I remember that actually. Actually, now that I think we did get that. I remember the cards and the gum.
Well, they
I
started,
have
and then they
the
got
full
banned
set.
after a while.
They never
Yeah.
made toys out of that.
I think, well, they made giant cards. Like they had postcard size cards that you could buy. I had because I was I was kind of a completist. So I have like the entire series up to like, I think the 8th series.
Jeez.
And I had the full size cards. They did a series of t-shirts I had, and then I've got a Garbage Pail Kids bank. I had a clock. So, I mean, they did do some merchandising. And then when the movie came out, they did a lot more merchandising around the movie.
Why did the movie fail?
It's terrible.
Well, it's a terrible
weird.
movie.
Yeah, I saw it not long ago.
Because it's live action. And I mean, if they'd made like a Garbage Pail Kids cartoon, I think it probably would have worked.
That's true, yeah.
But I saw it was...
The effects are kind of amazing, though. The
well,
creatures look amazing.
It's hard
It is.
to adapt. It's a one note joke. It's like trying to make a Mad Magazine movie. How do you do that? Because the whole point was you're taking a quirky name and basing it on like a really messed up demise for a kid, like a terrible way for a kid to die, and then that's their name, their nickname.
Right.
know?
What was up with the alligator guy?
Oh, he
I
was
didn't understand that.
Alligator.
Okay,
He
but I
was
didn't
awesome.
understand.
Alligator. He was just a dude that ate people.
And the
ate
plot
feet.
of the movie was also really kind of icky for a kid because I was a kid watching it, but it was about how this town has this thing called the state home for the ugly,
Yes.
where they send
The ugly.
people and they burn them. And so all of the Garbage Pail Kids' friends have been sent there and destroyed.
Well,
so they're all that's left and they're trying not to get sent there.
No,
And-
that's like one. I remember as a kid that being the most fucked up thing ever because it's a throwaway line. They're essentially all right. So there's like hundreds of Garbage Pail Kids apparently, but the movie only focuses on like 7 of them or whatever.
And they're clothes designers.
Yeah, and they're clothes designers apparently. They're really good at it. But apparently, so so there's an organization that like kidnapped all their friends, all the hundreds of other ones or whatever. And there's a moment like in the third act of the movie where they get captured as well, and they escape. And you see a shot of like a garbage truck that's going by or whatever. And it's just a throwaway line where they're like, what happened to all the other ones? And it's just like, they're all dead.
Wow.
Just like that garbage truck you saw roll off, they were all destroyed.
Oh, that's cool.
They're like, they killed everyone.
Yeah, everyone else got killed.
So as a kid, you're just like, that's just messed up.
It was, I liked the movie as a kid, and I still, this is the oddest story.
It's
I was at
pleasure.
a convention once, and Sean Astin was there.
Yes.
And he's sitting there signing, and I was...
That's his brother in it, right?
Yeah.
Mackenzie?
Well, Mackenzie's in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Sean Astin was signing at this convention I was at for Fango, and I'm at the booth across the way, and Mackenzie is there with him, not doing appearances. He's just like hanging out with his brother. And I went up, I stood in line, and Sean's publicist is there, and he's like, do you want to buy a headshot to get signed? And I was like, I want to talk to Mackenzie. And I walked up and I was like, I love you in Spookies, and I love you in Pail Kids, the movie. And he was so taken aback by it. He was like, you saw that? And I was like, yes.
Of course we did.
Yes, I have to go find something for you to sign immediately. Was he the one in Spookies? There was another horror film that Mackenzie did.
I don't remember that one. I remember...
Maybe Sean Astin.
Look at that dude who played Alligator.
One of them
Holy
was
cow.
in Spookies.
Go look up the guy who played Alligator right now. He looks
and
different.
Valerie
now.
Vomit.
And Valerie Vomit.
Yeah.
She's nothing to vomit about.
Really?
Yeah, that's funny. Anyway, this is going slightly
Completely off.
into garbage chest.
I'm trying to see who was in Spookies that I remember. There was somebody.
And I can't talk about our childhoods without saying my number one thing in my whole childhood, not just and number one, like above comics, above horror films, was Scooby-Doo. I liked Scooby.
Okay.
I liked the original old school Hanna-Barbera cartoons of Scooby-Doo more than almost anything. It was definitely my gateway. I just love everything about it. I remember if I was only allowed to watch one show, I would come home and watch Scooby-Doo. Just something about those, the old ones. I turned it on now. I saw it was on TV. Turned it on now. I didn't even know what I was looking at. It's like weird live action. It's a TV show. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Set in high school. It's just embarrassing. But the original ones were really great. The animation of the spooky characters were amazing. You know? I wish they would have made a film animated like that from that time period and that old school animated style. I loved it.
Okay, it wasn't Spookies. I'm still trying to figure out what this other film he was in was. It will come to me eventually. Yeah, he was in something from my youth as well, and it was a horror film, like an old VHS horror film.
We're in a moment gonna transfer to docs.
Yeah,
I think we should take a break point right here.
We'll break now. Our guests will come on, and we will continue with horror docs.
And I'll figure out what Sean or Mackenzie Astin was in.
So we've been talking about our childhood horror obsessions and toys and things that we enjoyed and things that not so much about being obsessed necessarily while you're a kid, but that also led to this grander obsession in our lives or this thing we keep interested in. And we were going to talk about documentaries, how they played a part. Documentaries can mean a lot of things. It can mean anything from special features on DVDs, which is pretty much the main thing it means nowadays. But there was also horror films that were released on VHS, back in the day. Just documentary, one that just off the top of my head, like The World of Horror, Dario Argento's World of Horror, something like that, that you see that enriched your understanding of that person's film so much more, got you way more, or maybe you saw clips of ones you hadn't seen yet, got you really excited about it. So we're going to kind of talk, it makes sense to start with you because obviously I'd be curious to even know when you first saw Psycho, where it infected you.
Yeah. Just a disclaimer to our audience. Our guest, unfortunately, is not going to be able to make it tonight, but we were going to have Paul Davis, who, he made the documentary Beware the Moon about an American Werewolf in London, which is on the Blu-ray. And he's just in town from London at the moment. And I thought it'd be interesting to have him for this topic because we both kind of came up together at the same exact time. And what I mean by that is when I was saying before, on top of, the movie It, I went through my phases for horror franchises, like where I would become obsessed and I'd have to see every one of the films in that franchise, know all the details, etc. So there was like Nightmare on Elm Street was the first big one, Halloween at some point. I remember, as pretentious and douchey as it sounds, I remember I had a birthday coming up once and videotapes at that point, retail for VHS here in America was $19.99, which is pretty darn expensive for a VHS tape. And I remember I was trying to cohort all of my guests for my birthday party to buy me a Friday the 13th movie because I figured I could get all 8 of them if they would all put in $20.
That's smart, yeah.
So I had my obsessions with different franchises. At one point, I finally discovered the Psycho movies, and I wish I could remember the order or how I saw them. And
you didn't start with the first one?
I don't think so. You know what? My vague memory, I have two memories that are kind of mixed together. And you know, when we get to our Psycho episode, we'll delve a little bit more into this. But I remember there was a Fangoria show called the Horror Hall of Fame that they aired for 3 years. And I think I have the first one on DVD, which Tony Timpone was nice enough to give to me. And the thing that was cool about it was an awards show that honored the classics. And by honoring him, it was like they did these little featurettes, you know, and there's a time before there were DVDs, special features where you'd get featurettes like that. And, you know, they were, you know, it was little segments on The Exorcist, on Alien. And I just remember this great segment on Psycho. And it had, you know, snippets of the infamous trailer with Hitchcock in it, which of course, like I already knew who Hitchcock was as a personality. The show was on TV and stuff. And then Stephen Rebello, who wrote the book, Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho, was interviewed in this little Horror Hall of Fame segment. So I have a memory of that and just being so captivated and fascinating by that particular one. And in particular, Robert Englund was the host of the show, of the Horror Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And so he narrated these segments, and just hearing him call Norman Bates the Hamlet of horror, like that immediately was like, you know, I was always interested in Shakespeare in high school and stuff like that. When we were studying, I was like, ooh, there's a horror character that's Shakespearean. Now I'm intrigued. But I also have a vague memory of walking into my cousin's living room while they were watching Psycho 3 and just seeing it a little bit with the mother corpse pointing at Jeff Fahey and like running out of the room immediately because I'm like, it scared the crap out of me. So those two memories, you know, are kind of competing which one is the first. But yeah, I mean, that was the franchise that I just fell in love with because unlike Freddy and Jason and all these other characters, Norman Bates was real. He was like as close to a real human being as this could happen, like in real life. Like this guy could legitimately have this mental illness and have a motel and blah, blah, blah. It didn't delve into the supernatural and all that.
And it was based on, you know, real stories.
It was based on truth once I looked into it.
Ed Gein
and honestly, it was a combination of both the character Norman Bates, the idea that why do I feel so bad for this guy? Why is, you know, like I don't feel bad for Freddy. I laugh with him because there's part of that over-the-top nature of that character, especially in the sequels when he gets comedic. But it's like, I don't want Norman to get caught. There's just some weird thing that even at a young age...
Well, you also don't want Norman to kill.
Exactly. You don't
want want him to somehow beat it.
Yeah, especially in Psycho 2, you don't want to believe that he's the one responsible if he is, you know. So I just became obsessed with those movies and that character, and then Anthony Perkins, and then of course it's like I remember him in The Black Hole and Edge of Sanity,
which is my unseen entry for this week. So
cool.
Please check out FEARNET, my article on Edge of Sanity.
Have you got that on DVD?
I do.
I have it too. It's a weird movie. It's very weird.
I love it.
Crimes of Passion,
stylized.
which is the Ken Russell movie. With the kind,
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I loved it, and you know, I grew up in a time. You know, this leads into childhood obsessions as well. You know, one of the things I was so happy about back home was finding all my Fangoria comics issues. You know, I have tons and tons of Fangorias that I bought over the years. And it's just neat to skim through them again, see these articles and like the way that they teased and promoted upcoming movies and stuff. But I always remember thinking like, you know, I know so much about the first Psycho, but there's nothing about 2, 3, and 4. Mm-hmm. And those are the ones I remember the most. Those were the more prominent ones. So I just became obsessed with like, I wonder how far I can get. Can I talk to the guy that wrote Psycho 2? Can I find, you know, the writer of Psycho 3, that sort of thing? And that's essentially where my doc evolved, was out of a lot of naivety in terms of like, well, I interview people for Icons of Fright, so how much harder could it be to interview them on camera? Right. And it was fun because at the beginning, I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but people like Paul came to me and he said, hey, man, I'm doing the same thing for American Werewolf in London. It's a Universal thing. I know Psycho's Universal. Maybe we could trade pointers and see how, you know, what you're dealing with, what I'm dealing with. And simultaneously, there was the guys that made The Shark Is Still Working.
Yeah, Michael Roddy.
J. Michael Roddy was the producer. James Gillette directed it. There was like 5 dudes that collectively made that.
Which they had problems getting released as well.
I mean, yeah, and that's the funny thing. It's like all 3 of us were kind of... Here's the thing. We were in a unique spot because... like the horror doc from a fan perspective is now a common thing. There's just so many
it's more than that. It's almost like an expected extra.
It's expected, yeah.
Which means that a lot of them aren't that interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
When we were all doing that, it was like, the only one that existed that I knew of was Halloween 25 Years of Terror, which spawned out of that 25-year convention. They did a convention here in Pasadena, filmed all the panels, and then Stephen Hutchinson, who's a friend of mine and who wrote some of the Halloween comics, it decided to expand it and make it into a documentary. That was the first of its kind that I saw that was a feature-length documentary about a franchise. And that inspired me. I'm like, oh my God, if he could do that, I would love to do one of these for Psycho. And at any point, if Universal said, hey, we could do special features on a release, then I would have been like, great, let's just make them special features. But it was interesting to see out of nowhere, it's like, here's these guys that are so passionate about Jaws and the effect that it still has, that they're not waiting for the studio. They're not waiting for the legalities of licensing. They're just going to do it. And I did the same thing, and Paul did the same thing. And
better to ask forgiveness than permission. It's the oldest creative trick in the book.
How did I do it to do over again?
Yeah, you might have asked for permission.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like,
but you wouldn't have gotten it, and that's the truth about a lot of these things back in the day.
Yeah,
it would have killed what you did.
I had to pay an exorbitant amount of money on licensing fees from Universal. There was a very short period where they were interested, and then they passed, and I was like, well, I'm still going to do this. I'm like, as long as you pay licensing for what you're using.
Yeah, I was just telling him about that. Yeah.
Kind of got reevaluated a year or two ago, and now it probably would be legal.
That's the bummer. Is there's I wish I did it differently, because I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. It's my first film.
But also it probably helped put it on the map because it's before the glut. So had you waited till now where it's legal, there might have been 5 Psycho documentaries.
Right. I mean, I was a little bummed because I was very happy that it found a home with Shout Factory, which now the irony is that Scream Factory is just like blowing up. And like, I knew back then when I met them, I was like, these guys mean it. They give a shit. They care about this property and what to do with the doc. So I was glad to get it out with them. Paul had a different situation with Beware the Moon, where he, along the lines, met John Landis, who directed the movie, and became really good friends with him. And John essentially just went to Universal and he's like, I want my movie on Blu-ray. And that was the end of it. The guys that did the Jaws one, that was like a whole affair. I mean, they had Steven Spielberg interviewed in the doc and his blessing. They had Richard Dreyfuss. They had Roy Scheider. They had everybody involved in Jaws, and Universal still wouldn't bite on their case.
I remember when they were making it, we had them on Fangoria Radio. We had Michael Roddy on to talk about it. And it was like 5 years later, he was still trying to get it put out. It took forever.
I wonder what the thinking about that was. I'd be curious from a studio perspective.
Yeah, I mean, well, at that period, even though Spielberg did an interview with them, Spielberg was still apprehensive about releasing any of his films on Blu-ray.
Oh.
So at the time, 5 years ago, none of them were really available on Blu-ray. The once they announced Jaws on Blu-ray, finally they had a place to put it. I actually have an original, I want to say 3 or 4 hour cut of it.
I have one of the original.
It was on 2 discs and stuff. It was excessive. Like, it was that intense that they did a 4 hour one. And obviously the criticisms they got were like, oh, nobody wants to watch 4 hours of one thing. And then ironically, Never Sleep Again came later along with Crystal Lake
Memories.
Arguably
the greatest of all.
Yeah. Which, I don't know if you know, I moved out here hoping to direct it.
Oh, really? Never Sleep Again?
Oh, yeah.
How? Why?
Because I thought I was going to direct.
Who did you know?
I knew a producer that was on. His name was Jason, and which I worked on. And that was the other thing. I caught a little bit of flack on Psycho Legacy because I used a lot of filmmaker friends of ours. Like Adam and Joe, who do Movie Crypt here. They're in my film. Dave Parker, as well as the people that were in the movies. And the reason I did that is because at the time nobody had done that before, and not a lot of the people, I wasn't sure if I was going to get a lot of the people from the actual movies, especially part 1, because most of them were all gone. So to me, it was like I was having these great conversations with these filmmakers now at bars about the Psycho films and just like what they loved about them. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what I got to capture. I want to get this bar conversation so that if somebody's not familiar with these movies, at least through these new filmmakers, they could be like, oh, I get why it's cool now.
Yeah, that's a good
And then
idea.
you kind of get to hear the background. But, his name was Jason, came out in the period that I was making Psycho Legacy. And that kind of was a little too heavy on people not involved with the series and got a lot of criticism for that, which is, why Dan Farrens went back and did Crystal Lake Memories to kind of quote unquote do it right.
Right.
But the Never Sleep Again thing is a whole other story.
Yeah.
I talked about it on Buzz's podcast.
If you hadn't, you never would be here because it took Andrew making that.
I know, exactly.
To recommend us to do a show. Exactly. And here we are. And it is kind of the holy grail of those, mostly because, not just because of how good a job they did making it, but again, sometimes it comes down to, is there a story there? And there's not always a story there. There was a story there.
Yeah.
The story of a studio. And it's an incredible story. And if you haven't seen it and you have got 4 hours, the thing is, you think you'll watch it in installments. You won't. You will sit there and you will start watching it and you will watch 4 hours of it because it's compelling.
Yeah.
Bekah, I'll ask you because me and you are in different. Obviously, my interest in this, your interest pushed you into horror, Fangoria, all of this. My interest made me create a show where I did basically making a documentary every week, but without the hard part. I got to just bring people on and talk to them. But if you were going to do a franchise or a film, is there anything you would have made a film like that on? Like if you had to put all that time into?
I definitely would love to see one on the Hellraiser series.
I was about to ask about that.
That's like one of my passion projects. The Hellraiser series was a big one for me. So I always want to know kind of the stories of, all of the different levels of it, because there were so many stories that Clive never got to tell.
Yeah.
And then the comic books, as I've mentioned before, are just a huge interest for me as well.
Big world. And there's probably an interesting story about the decline and like the problems with who has the rights. And I'm sure
there were censorship issues because Clive Barker was involved. I'm sure that there were things where they were like, whoa, that's a little too fetishy in S&ME and things like that.
There's footage for one that never got finished by our friend Ryan Turek.
Mm-hmm.
He had after we finished, I finished Psycho Legacy. I brought in a producer, Tony Massey, who produced His Name Was Jason, and he teamed up with Ryan to do a Hellraiser one,
Scream one,
and it's the Scream one, which is on the blue, Still Screaming, which is on the Blu-ray set of that. They never finished the Hellraiser one. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
Maybe it was access.
But I never really watched the ones that were movie specific. But in that same regard, one of them kind of changed my life. So when I first graduated from my master's degree, I was a school teacher. For 2 years, I was teaching English and film studies in Virginia. And I've always been like a huge horror fan, of course. But for Christmas, the second year I was teaching, my husband got me an American Scream. The documentary that came out in 2000.
Simon, is that his one?
Adam Simon. It focused on all the Grindhouse films, all of Wes Craven and John Carpenter's early stuff.
Right.
And I watched it, and it was definitely my fuck this moment where I was like, I don't want to teach school forever. I was watching these 10-year jockey teachers who had been there forever, and they were miserable. And I was only in my second year, and I felt myself
one of them's listening to you right now. Tears streaming down.
I'm sorry. No, there were some great teachers who had passion and really, truly loved what they were doing. And then there were other ones that had been just going through the motions for 30 years. And it was that moment when I was watching that I was like, you know what? This is what I fucking have passion for. And I moved to New York, and 6 months later, I was working at Fangoria. So, and then once I started working at Fangoria, pretty quickly, I discovered Chris Garetano's horror business.
Yeah.
And that definitely really opened my eyes too. I loved that.
If you guys haven't seen it, you got to check out Horror Business by Chris Garetano and Elric. I know you haven't. I have. I toured. Chris is from Long Island, New York, where I'm from, and I befriended him early on in the process, and I got to go with him to show the movie. Like we showed it in Austin, and I went with him there, and it was just. It's an amazing. It's a very inspiring movie because it's the 99% of the horror filmmakers out there, the guys that are on the outskirts that never exactly make it, but still feel compelled. It's part of childhood obsession that leads into adult obsession, where you're just obsessed to make these kind of movies. So no matter what. People more
like the American movie guy, not as funny necessarily.
I'm
he's in
it
yeah,
for myself. Yeah, they're in it.
Mark Bouchard is in it. It's kind of a follow-up to, indirectly a follow-up to American movie.
I know my movie may never get seen. I'm paying for it myself. My dad's holding the camera, but I still have to make this.
And that was especially strong pre-digital. I mean, that passion and the expense was so much stronger because you had to learn filmmaking. You don't have to learn filmmaking now. You can turn on a camera now. It's very different. Point and shoot's a different thing. But you had to really invest.
You want to do it.
And you had to talk to your uncle into giving you.
A lot of people,
And I have to say, the last movie that I cried in was also a horror doc, American Scream. Was the one about the home haunters that came out last year.
Oh, yeah.
That I saw.
Director of Best Worst Movie,
Which is also great.
And I bawled my eyes out during that because it just embodied the passion that I feel for horror movies. It was watching these guys have it for Halloween. And then I also have to say the ones that just kind of like focus on a niche thing that you might not know about. Like I watched Machete Maidens, which focused on the horror films being shot in the Philippines.
You know, this is really weird. I really hated it.
Really?
Oh, you did?
Because I love the exploitation one. I loved it. I found it so boring. But I knew a lot about that world.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot about those films, but I don't know. For some reason, I found it like boring. Like the way it was made, it was all talking heads. I don't know why.
Just so you guys know, it's a filmmaker named Mark Hartley.
Just did Patrick.
Just did the remake of Patrick, Evil Awakens, which is the subtitle for now. His first movie is Not Quite Hollywood, which is
just amazing. It's so good.
A great movie.
It's really one of the most fun I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that you will sit there with a pen and pad and be marking down the names of tons of insane horror movies that are like, I got to see that. I got to see that. Not Quite Hollywood. And then he followed it up with Machete Maidens Unleashed, which is kind of, as Rebekah said, a lot of these weird exploitation movies made in the Philippines. I like it because I Roger Corman stuff is always fascinating.
Oh, yeah, so totally.
All the elements that talk about that and like Pam Grier and all that.
I think it was formal. I think it was a formal thing compared to the other one. I think it was all like people in a dark room talking. And maybe it just felt like a cheapie to me. It felt like, I quickly threw this one together after I made this really ambitious, great one, which isn't a problem.
It's very similar to American Grindhouse, which is the one that Elijah Drennan
made. See, I like that more because American Grindhouse, he's a friend of mine, so, preface that. But what I liked about American Grindhouse has one major problem. It feels a little educational. It feels a little too like, now we do this chapter. Yeah, now we're looking at this chapter, So it feels a little more like, hey, this would be great as your intro, but not necessarily a great documentary. Yeah. But what's great about it is that he talked to these amazing people, or like some who aren't with us anymore. Ray Dennis Steckler, who, is fascinating, fucking in his video store. And he got talked. So some of these interviews aren't in a dark room with black background. They're in the place where these people are living now or dying now. Really, like a couple of them. One guy, I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Steckler, who's on a respiratory. Ted V. Milky's coming out from Vegas. So what I like about that is that
this weekend.
He is?
Yeah, he's here this weekend for
we should get him on
the full moon
Esther
release
Zombie.
of their new magazine.
Right.
He's going to be at Dark Delicacies
on Saturday too.
We should. That would be cool. But like, I really love that when you can see like where someone's living and what they did with their life, and it's I don't know. I really that's one thing about American Grindhouse. I really like what Elijah did with that,
Right. Well, more recently within the last several years. I mean, of course, the franchise ones we already mentioned a bunch of them. We're not going to argue that Never Sleep Again is probably the best of that bunch. But I mean, it got to the point where there's More Brains, which is the Return of the Living Dead one,
which was okay. It kept me amused. It wasn't the greatest.
It's getting to the point where it's like, I like the Return of the Living Dead movies, but do we really need a doc about them? Well,
this is the thing. Is it a fan thing?
There's a Pet Cemetery one coming. No, it's an official one.
It was made by Bill Philippo,
I mean,
right?
this trend I'm saying is like, it's not for me because I don't view myself as just a fan. I'm somebody who's like just wants to be. I want to be interested because it's a good story. And so Never Sleep Again is just a great documentary. I think somebody who maybe had seen Nightmare on Elm Street but didn't have a passing interest could still be captivated by that story.
Right.
Whereas I think most of these now are literally just, hey, if you're a real big fan of this, here's some more information.
Yeah.
And I don't find that compelling, even though I think it's cool and it's a cool extra feature kind of thing. It's not what I would be like. For me, the only one I would want to make, personally, I thought it would be cool to do a massive thing on Giallo, on the world, the history, the literature.
I would love to watch that.
I pitched it to the guy who does Nightmare, who did not Nightmares and Red Wine, Never Sleep Again, one of the people there, and he's just like, there'd be just no market to get the money for it, to the budget.
That's the thing, yeah.
But like, if you flew out tomorrow, there's still all those directors are all still alive. And if you get them, and then you get the actresses, and then you get the people who made the Giallo yellow books, paperbacks, you could look at because here's another reason to make a film. Because you don't have all the answers is a good reason to make something.
Yeah.
And that's one of the only subgenres of horror where I'm like, I don't know why Giallo was so popular in Italy. I don't know much about J&B being in every movie. I don't know like why the mask, I don't understand Italian culture, but for me, that's a good reason to want to make something. Right. And, it'll never happen. So hopefully somebody in Italy is going to make it and I can watch it.
See, I've been hoping for one on the Pinky films for a long time. They're not horror, but they're, these Japanese softcore films.
That would be interesting too.
Oh, Rob knows. I was Thanksgiving, I had so much Japanese porn at trivia night, and I was like, "Where's Rob?"
Yeah,
I own it all. It's okay.
But I had two I wanted to bring up. I've talked about one before, but they're so important to me. They're more important than anything in my childhood obsession, and then neither of them are quite documentaries, depending on the thing. Number one for anything in my life has been, and especially for why I would have started a show, was the Incredibly Strange Film Show. Was so important to me. I had them on VHS. I saw all of them. It was like Stuart Gordon, Bruce Campbell. We talked about, what's her name?
There was the porn woman. They did Doris Wishman.
Yeah, Doris Wishman, Ted V. Milkes.
They did Annie Sprinkle was the one I was thinking of.
And this is before anyone had interviews with these people. And Jonathan Ross is not what an American host is, like a slick, hi, I'm a host. He's like got a lisp. He's from England. He knows all the movies inside out. He was goofy. I have an absolute love, and you can see them all on YouTube now. They've got an HD channel, and there's some amazing interviews in there with people. What's cool about them, they're not retrospective interviews. They're not, hey, let's talk to Sam Raimi now about what he was doing. This is like at Evil Dead 2 time. This is Stuart Gordon, post Reanimator, Jackie Chan. And then there's some really offbeat people who I had never heard of, and I think it had a major impact on the just having conversations with interesting people and realizing that you could come to LA. Actually, the best one is a director of just not even that interested is Fred Olen Ray.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating. They make him look like the playboy of horror at that particular time. He was the king
of the bikini films.
Yeah, for that little period. So that's one. But the other one, which I'm really excited to, if people haven't seen it, because it's my all-time favorite interview in the history of anything. It's Mick Garris interviewing Cronenberg, John Landis, and Carpenter.
Love it.
It's called the Fear on Film Roundtable, and I must have seen that on tape again because the internet wasn't around, and it made me just fall in love with, because I liked all the filmmakers.
It's on the Videodrome Blue Criterion release. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
It's on the blue.
It's on eBay. I mean, it's on it's on YouTube.
But yeah, it's a special
I
feature.
rewatched it before the show, and it held up completely because all three of the directors, Carpenter, again, says the least, like you're saying, but Cronenberg, like, literally just kind of gets what his films are completely about in this one conversation. And Mick Garris just is like this. He's kind of like us. Like, he was this young guy who just really wanted to talk to these three guys about these movies. And I respect that interview so much because it's just so interesting. Landis is great in it. If you haven't seen it, maybe we'll post the first part on our page just to hook you, because it's fascinating.
Yeah, they were making the movies they made at that time. Like, Landis was talking about American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
Carpenter was talking about The Thing.
Yeah, Carpenter was still finishing The Thing, and Videodrome was what Cronenberg was.
Yeah,
so no one had seen Videodrome
That's crazy.
yet. And he's talking about it from the inside. He's like, yeah, I'm making this film where people have a channel and it's like pornographic. And I'm just watching, this is so cool. But in their own words, and before there was a lot of material like that, because now there's a glut of stuff, including podcasts, It's so unique when you come across something where the people are talking at the time in the voice.
Yeah, totally.
And that, I couldn't recommend those two enough. And then, recent years, a good friend of mine, Joe Madry, who's from my trivia team, he made my favorite recent doc, which is Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, because it's the historical context of, and Lance Henriksen does a great job with the voiceover, but it's really well written.
Yeah.
It's a really smart documentary. And I think I had... Oh, well, and then we've talked about this on the show a number of times. My favorite documentary in terms of it's just so interesting, and I think Beck ended up tracking it down, was Demon Lover Diary.
Yep.
It's been one of my favorite movies, period, for like the last 10 years since I saw it on a shitty VHS, and I've never seen a good copy of it. I wouldn't even know what that looks like, but it's the perfect making of before they existed. It's shot cinema verite. They're just following. It's literally this girl, I might make a documentary. Oh, my boyfriend just got called to be the DP. They want to borrow his camera, so he's going to be the DP of a horror film. So then we're getting in a truck and let's go make it. And the filmmakers are it's a total mess who these people are and what they're, but it's so honest. And my dream is that Criterion or someone will do that and the actual movie on some disc together.
Yeah.
Because the doc's much better than the feature, but yeah, it's fascinating. We should do a Killer POV screening of that.
Yeah, we should.
That's a really interesting
And
film.
I was just thinking, this one's not horror, but it is something that I would love to do, because we were talking about Fred Olen Ray, and it reminded me of one of my passions that I've always loved to explore, which is Andy Sedaris films, which most people don't know about.
They're the dirties?
I would call them dirties. We were talking about Fred Olen Ray and his kind of, he was the playboy of horror with all the women in bikinis. Yeah. But Sedaris was the same way, but his were always like action films with women in bikinis. So it was like Ladies movies with machine guns and riding hovercrafts. And
I think so. I would love to get going forward in our show, getting a few people from that kind of world, the more exploitation stuff.
Oh yeah,
because we could probably get Fred Olin, right?
Yeah, I know Fred. Yeah, I'm sure we could. But the problem is, you get certain people after the wave, and it's them looking back with a certain perspective that's so different than when you see them talking. When like Fred's interview on this show is so interesting because you would get the feeling from this interview that he would be the biggest name in the genre right now. Like, really? And not just because he's talking himself up, because it really looks like he's on fire.
I think
and chainsaw hookers and everything.
And then
and then you just see how the industry. So that's where it's an interesting documentary.
Yeah,
people, him and Warnowski, is that shift, that Boogie Nights shift that we sometimes talk about on here, from film to video to cheaper and cheaper budgets.
Yeah,
and it's some people survive that, others can't.
Well, to Going to Pieces, the rise and fall of the slasher film is a pretty good one. Not great, but it's pretty interesting if you like that period of time. I was actually on Netflix Instant watching a few different things today. One that just, I don't know why it slipped into my radar, called Nightmare Factory. And
I've never heard of
it.
It's pretty good. It's essentially a documentary about Greg Nicotero and KMB.
Oh, okay.
It focuses primarily on Greg.
I think it's a new one.
It's fairly new, but the date was, I watched it today on Netflix Instant, but the date was 2011. And it seems like the period where Walking Dead first started. So it's a couple years old now, but yeah, you guys can check that out on Netflix Instant. And again, it's interesting to hear, kind of the history of KMB and how it all started. And, Greg Nicotero is notorious for shooting a lot of VHS footage on all the early movies. I mean, some of the best stuff on the Evil Dead 2 DVD and Blu-ray is his behind the scenes footage. So you get to see a lot of that in this Nightmare Factory documentary. I also watched The Real Story Amityville Horror today because I can never get enough of those. That was pretty good. It's a fairly new one. And then going back to the beginning of documentaries, like before there were fan-made ones, there's the most famous one I think is Document of the Dead.
Yeah, by our guest episode number 4.
Right, yeah, Roy Frumkus for Dawn of the Dead, which I think now Synapse Films has put out a Blu-ray version of Document of the Dead. Although I believe it comes with that fancy Anchor Bay 3-disc version as well. And also another early one I remember was one of the early ones I remember being sold separately was Texas Chainsaw Massacre: A Family Portrait,
right?
Which was one of the first interview-based ones about the making of the original. Yeah. And I remember just seeing the picture of Leatherface and what the hell is this? I've never seen this version of this movie, whatever. And being surprised that it was actually more of a kind of a war stories of making that movie as opposed to, another Chainsaw movie or whatever. So that's Docs, man. And you know what? I'll mention one more from previous guests. Several years back, both Mike Mendez and Dave Parker had done a documentary for Showtime called Masters of Horror before the show. And I believe you could look it up on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube in its entirety. And I mean, they spoke to everybody, John Carpenter's in it, Stuart Gordon, all these guys, and it's hosted by Bruce Campbell.
Oh, I've seen that. Yeah,
it's a pretty cool, just a general chat, delving into the horror genre with the quote unquote masters. But yeah, those guys did that at one point, and I thought it was a really cool doc.
To kind of for me, echo my point, I watched all of Mick Garris's, when I was doing This Week in Horror, I was doing it around the same time Mick Garris had done his FEARNET.
Postmortem,
which I
thought it was a lot of fun.
No, it's really well made, and some of them were really good, obviously. But the one thing that it just isn't as interesting is because these guys are towards the tail, almost all of them are at the end of their careers, and the way they look back is so different than when you get them when they're 45 and still on the hunt.
Yeah, I'll argue that because in terms of Postmortem, the best episodes for me were William Friedkin.
Yeah, that was good, and Robert Englund was
Robert Englund's great, and I thought the Rob Zombie one was great. It's just because he's a fascinating interview, whether you like his movies or not.
Yeah. But he is in the middle of his career. I'm saying in general, most of those guys like Wes and everyone, Carpenter, it's kind of like, it's different to hear somebody talking back this body of work, and I'm deified and all around the world, and people have posters. But when you're in the middle of your career and you're John Carpenter shooting The Thing, which is about to be a critical fucking zero, and yet would go on to be the most popular film in your filmography 20 years later. It's so interesting to me to hear people while they're working on these things.
It's weird.
Which is why it's good, I guess, that it's now become an expected thing to make extra features. I guess that's a good thing because it's a document, and if the film ends up being But I would like to see people chasing the story more than just the coverage.
Yeah, of course.
If you know what I mean.
Of course. And sometimes that just comes together in the editing process. Like,
right.
I didn't really have much of a battle plan with Psycho Legacy other than I'm just going to go movie to movie and talk about the making of it. And in the process, it became about Anthony Perkins.
Right.
It became about an actor who considered a role that, he did this role for the sake of working with Hitchcock that ended up becoming kind of a blessing and a curse.
Right.
And in the long run, accepting, you know what? I'm always going to be remembered as this character, and I guess that's okay, which he wasn't okay with for most of his life.
Right.
So it's funny when we were editing it because a lot of people ask me, why'd you cut out, why didn't you do anything about the remake or this and that? We shot stuff, but when you put it in the context of the movie, it's weird to separate. You're talking about Anthony Perkins as an actor and then as a director, and then like coming to terms with being this character, and then cutting away to a different movie that has nothing to do with that. It just didn't feel right. So it's interesting how sometimes you don't know what your story is going in. You could just have a rough template, and then it's interesting to see how the story tells itself.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. Yeah, for sure.
So any other hard docs that we want to mention?
I think that kind of...
let's do news.
Yeah, I got a
news and updates.
Yeah, news and plugs.
Couple of news bits that we haven't because we haven't done news in a while. I just want to ask you guys if you had seen some trailers that debuted this week. We finally got Godzilla. That was one of them. Yeah, new Godzilla.
Not gonna watch any.
You're avoiding trailers. You just don't want to. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll weekend, but Godzilla I probably will wait to see it.
Right. That looks pretty badass.
Yeah, I gotta say.
Bryan Cranston.
We had the writer at Jump Cut not long ago, and in an interview for a panel, and he was a really interesting guy. He also wrote the idea for the Expendables.
Oh, cool.
My only complaint with the trailer was that Bryan Cranston does his sad, weepy voice through the entire thing. That was like the whole trailer. It was like every time it cut back to what's going on, it was like sad and weepy.
They only give you a glimpse of Godzilla, but it looks like Godzilla.
It looks badass.
He looks like what he's supposed to look like.
Nice.
Other one that I was excited about was the Sacrament trailer finally dropped. Have you seen that one? Because you saw the movie.
I don't need to see the trailer. I've seen the movie.
But you know what? I'm always fascinated.
I'd be curious. I like the poster. I like this crazy poster.
I was fascinated, like, when you're next, I was like, I wonder how they're going to market this movie. How they're going to sell this movie. Same thing with the Sacrament. I love the movie, but I'm like, how do you
That
sell
is a hard,
this?
yeah, it's a harder sell.
Great trailer.
Okay, cool.
Great trailer. So I actually posted it on our
Does Eli's name
yes.
take center stage?
Yeah. Well, Eli,
as a selling tool, I'm just curious if that's good.
Yeah.
They
got to use their money, get their money's worth.
Of course, Eli Roth Presents, and then a film by Ty West, the director of House of the Devil.
Okay, I'll watch that because I've seen the movie.
Yeah, it's a good little trailer. On the Blu-ray front, Scream Factory's newest announcements are The Legend of Hell House.
Great choice.
Which is great. We saw that at Mike Williams. Was it Mike Williamson who showed it? Yeah.
Did he do a 30 or 16 millimeter screen?
I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I saw it on my own.
It was great. I'd never seen it before until within the last year. And it's a cool little horror movie with Roddy McDowell.
Uh-huh.
And so Scream Factory's going to be doing that and Motel Hell.
Yeah, which I saw again at the Arrow, and I really enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's madcap, and I'm sure it's going to look great. But another one of those tonally inconsistent.
Yeah, Motel Hell's weird because it came out. It kind of, there weren't as many horror comedies that we were seeing when it came out, and it's kind of just batshit.
Yeah, it's a weird movie,
and it's kind of redneck exploitation-y at the same time, and it's bizarre.
At some point, I want to do an article. Maybe I'll pitch it to Fangoria or something. But I want to do the history of trying to remake Motel Hell. And the reason being is because I know so many filmmakers that at one, like, first of all, it's not that popular a title that I don't understand why people were so obsessed with trying to remake it. But literally, so many of my filmmaker friends were attached at one point. Joe Lynch was going to remake it. My friend Will Rott got the rights at one point. Stephen Mena, the director of Malevolence, did. Stephen Miller was attached for several. Like, everybody I know was attached at some point for several months to remake that movie. Wow. So I think it might be interesting to do a little, just try to get a timetable and figure out who was attached to when and what they were going to do.
See, I feel the same about Critters, because just in the few years that I've been in LA, at least like 4 of my friends have been attached to either write the Critters remake, direct the Critters remake. Oh no, I'm writing the Critters remake now. And it's gone around
Critters
so much.
I can see. Motel Hell's, it's not even about a motel. There's no motel. I mean, kind of it's a motel in the film, but it's
fucked up farm.
It's more like, it's more like a farm with meat packaging. But
I don't fully get it, but I think that would be a fast. I think I'm going to work on that on the side as a little article about the history of trying to remake Motel, which hasn't been remade yet. That's the irony of it.
Which studio has it? Now that I say it, like filmmakers are going to flock to it.
Yeah,
like,
I know. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna do a little research on that.
Alas, it means that there was no shocker announced for Brian Collins. He was.
Oh,
I hate to break it to you, Brian Collins, but I'm fairly sure that the door to Universal for Scream Factory is currently closed.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I don't think they'll be able to do any of their stuff for a little while longer. But whatever. Lastly, news, just a couple of release dates. The Annabelle movie, the spin-off of Conjuring, is tentatively slated for October 3rd of this year.
Man, they shot that quick.
They're shooting it now. They're in the process of shooting it.
Yeah, I saw some pictures on James's page. It looks pretty good. I'm kind of excited.
I think I want to say it's the DP that's directing this one? James is only producing. And then they announced Conjuring 2 for next October 23rd, 2015.
Still no director.
No director attached for that yet. Although it'd be nice if James came back. But Vera and Patrick Wilson will be back for the Conjuring 2 at least.
Terrific.
So.
Has an Insidious 3 been greenlit?
Yeah, they announced it, and the last we heard was that Lee was writing it.
Okay.
That's the only news, was that Lee was brought back to write the third one.
Okay.
But nothing since. So,
Drew,
what announcements do you have?
Oh, well, this is an announcement, but I just read, I kind of want to go. I want to find Cinefamily members on Saturday. Well, one of my favorite directors on earth, Gaspar Noé, is showing up at Cinefamily for only members and showing a film called Angst that he loves to only members. And I just read this before I came here. I was like, oh man. And the only reason I'm not a Cinefamily member is because I can hardly ever get over there because I'm tied to being at Jump Cut, So,
yeah, of course.
So it's kind of frustrating because I would totally kill to go to that. So, which is kind of cool. But no, I'll bring it up now. I'll go into it more detail later. Cine Mayhem is a 3-night retro film festival being put on by the horror chick Heather Wixon. And basically it's going to be 3 nights of kind of very intimate, because the space is 50 people, conversations with these filmmakers, with some new work, some new shorts, but mostly retro features. One night is going to be Carpenter's The Fog.
Nice.
With John Carpenter there. One night will be Vamp with the director of Vamp, and one night.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
And guess who's short screening before Vamp?
Oh yeah, that'll be the comedy. Yeah. That'll be the horror comedy.
So my new short found is screening before Vamp.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah,
that wasn't part of my press release, but that's okay.
Whatever.
Shut up, Elric.
That's okay. That's right. I had something to do with, I think, the film. I was there anyway.
Yeah, you were there.
I was there. And then the second night is Clive Barker's. He can't be there, but it's Nightbreed. No, Hellraiser. But the cool draw, tentative Doug Bradley.
Okay, cool.
Because he's here from Monsterpalooza, so he's a rare LA sighting in terms of like interview.
Yeah.
It's not 100%, but the thing that is 100%, which is super cool, is that Jump Cut's walls will be taken over by original Clive Barker artwork coming directly from Clive's house, like she went there today and
got it.
And picked it's a moon. She said a Moonlight series or something. I don't know.
I can't wait. That's
so it's going to be
great.
kind of crazy for such a small place, but I'm really thankful to her to doing it. What's
really the ticket
neat.
Situation?
So she's going to. We met yesterday to discuss it. So because it's such a small place, it's all going to be RSVP tickets. We're going to probably be using something called brown paperback.
Yeah.
There'll probably be about 35 put up for each night. And then the others there'll be a few reasons we're keeping some aside. But on the plus side, somebody who listens to the show we're going to have 2 tickets. So for one person's going to win, they'll get 2 passes to all 3 nights.
All right.
And we will probably do that in a couple weeks, maybe on our 50th. And we might do it for that.
When's the event again?
The event is the 28th, 29th, 30th, or 27th, 28th, 29th of March. It's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday night.
Which sucks because I won't be there.
Oh, where are you going?
I will be at the Twisted Terror Con in Sacramento.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you want to be at your own film?
No, I'm showing my film in Sacramento as well. They're doing like a couple of my films in Sacramento.
You have to go?
Well,
this will be way cooler.
I'm kind of running the Fango booth.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I have to be there for
it.
it.
If you're listening, go visit Bekah.
See me in Sacramento.
But yeah, this will be so small. And I think, so long as Carpenter shows up, because obviously I'm sure he's the type who on the day might be like, hey, I want to play video games, but
right.
or play basketball. But if he does, you won't get this opportunity like ever to be in such a small space. I mean, I don't even know if he knows how small Jump Cut is.
Right.
But I mean, we're talking like you would sit there and you'd be able to see everyone who's in the room with you, which is not what these guys are used to doing. So it's kind of for me, it's exciting because I think, if we can get a good conversation with any of these people, it's going to be fascinating. So,
right.
But yeah, we will definitely let you guys know, and we'll let you know when the tickets on our Facebook, when tickets are going up to, we want, fans to be there.
Yeah.
But this isn't a like, hey, let's all go get our autographs and let's all mob a place. It's not that kind of event.
Yeah. So we'll be giving away tickets for that. We got to figure out some kind of prize for the 50th episode as well.
Right, could be that.
Yeah, I think I can come up with a couple of DVDs.
Yeah, and J. Michael Kober, your signed Kevin Tenney, Night of the Demons is not on its way, but it's on my shelf ready to send you. I've just been super lazy.
He's about to give birth again to another child.
But I'm going to get you your DVD.
So,
and we have to watch Killer Tongue.
Yes.
We're going to watch Killer Tongue for the 50th.
Maybe that should have been our first commentary. The first time we've seen this movie, we were sitting there and watching Killer Tongue and reacting to first
Killer Tongue.
That could be kind of interesting.
None of us have seen it. It could be fun.
That could be a way to go.
I don't like talking through a movie the first time I'm watching it.
Yeah, you're probably
right. It's kind of,
that's probably true.
Attention, right?
Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah. Way to scold me.
Whatever. So thanks for listening again. Hit up the Geek Nation page, comment, let us know what you think of the episodes, spread the word. We're almost at 1,000 likes on Facebook, which is great. And that's also a great way to communicate with us. All three of us check in on the Facebook page and comment back or reply to a lot of the stuff that you guys.
And also tell us, I was thinking about this, I haven't even asked these two yet. Tell us if you want us to create a Twitter account for it, because we could have it go right from Facebook. And we could all three occasionally go in it, or if you prefer us just being ourselves, talking about it. It could be handy to get the word out about things. Right. So if you think that's something that you would like to see, tell us.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Should we be on Twitter?
Yeah, should we be on Twitter?
Killer POV.
Yeah, it's a deep philosophical question. Thanks as always for joining us.
Yep.
We will be back in 2 weeks' time with something special.
2 weeks.